1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, minus 16 in Ottawa, minus 14 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa and the Valley began with a blast of snow this morning. That's expected to change to a period of freezing rain or drizzle later on today. Here's City News reporter Jason White with what you can expect.
An Alberta Clipper is responsible for this morning's snow. Not nearly as much as that record breaker at the start of the week, but our meteorologist Jill Taylor says it'll be followed by the potential for freezing rain.
As our temperature rises to near that freezing mark and then drops sharply again tonight to minus 20, feeling like the minus 30s.
It has been a grueling week for road clearing crews. The City of Ottawa's Bryden Denyes tells me they couldn't get all of the cleanup done from the last storm before this snow started this morning.
It's been a very challenging storm to deal with another storm right on its back. Staff are out working. We will continue to work until everything is cleaned up.
The focus this morning is the priority routes, but some snow clearing crews are still on residential sidewalks, working their way through from the last snow dump. Jason White, City News.
City News time, 9:01. Now, as students headed back into class for the first time since before Christmas, for the most part, hundreds of students were left scrambling to find a way to school today. It had nothing to do with the weather, but 174 school bus routes canceled today. That was in the Eastern Ontario area, the affected schools in both Upper Canada and the Catholic Board of Eastern Ontario. While no reason was given, the COVID-19 pandemic has left school bus operators across Ontario scrambling to find enough school bus drivers. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Snow will taper to flurries late morning, some more flurries for the afternoon, and a risk of some freezing rain or drizzle as well. A shifting wind from the east-northeast to the southwest and will rise to minus 1 this evening, but then drop off sharply overnight. Will drop to minus 20 for the low. For today, the high this evening, minus 1.
Now it is feeling a bit colder in the wind, but minus 16 with some light snow in Ottawa, minus 14 in Smiths Falls. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has gathered virtually with some municipal leaders for a housing summit this morning. Ford said the goal is to come up with concrete ways to allow more families to buy a home. Now, Ford had invited the Prime Minister to the summit with Ontario's big city mayors and regional chairs, but Justin Trudeau will not be attending. City News time, 9:02. StatsCan says the annual pace of inflation climbed in December to its highest rate since 1991. The agency says the consumer price index in December was up 4.8% compared to a year ago. That was another slight increase over November's number, which was 4.7. Driving the faster pace of price growth in December, higher year-over-year prices for food, passenger vehicles, as well as housing. Australia is sending aid to Tonga in the wake of that destructive eruption of an undersea volcano near the Pacific Island nation.
Aid is on the way in the form of the Australian naval ship HMAS Adelaide, which will help with the relief effort after the huge volcanic eruption. Defence Minister Peter Dutton.
We will continue, particularly through the support of the men and women of the Australian Defence Force, to help Tonga get back on its feet and help it to recover from what obviously has been a catastrophic event.
Meanwhile, New Zealand's military is sending fresh water and other supplies, but ash covering Tonga's main runway is delaying flights in. Tom Rivers, ABC News at the Foreign Desk.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Ottawa. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off today. Derek Fage here filling in. You may recognize me from such shows as Operation Support Local and Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV. Excited to be here, good listener. My goodness, you tuned into Rogers TV, by the way, for this. Look at, I got newspapers all over the place here. Look, I got the Globe and Mail. I got at the Ottawa Citizen here. I've got two monitors in front of me. I've got my laptop with me. I got my phone. I mean, we are ready to roll here on the show today. My goodness. David and I are excited. What David is not excited about, and I cannot repeat what he actually texted me first thing this morning, there may be some language that isn't family friendly for radio. Let's just say he said something along the lines of, what the heck? Another storm? Oh my goodness. You'd think we lived in the nation's capital in this northern climate we call Canada or something.
I wasn't ready.
You weren't ready. You had a blast, eh, David? David opened that door and in that Alberta Clipper just rocked him.
It hit me right in the face.
Yeah.
Right in the face, 6 a.m.
My goodness, poor David.
That was bad.
Yeah, but you got your dad's fancy truck there. Dad lent you his fancy truck so you could just plow through. You probably didn't even shovel this morning. You just started that sucker up and just bowled your way to work, didn't you?
No, I didn't need to do the plow line or anything. Just
nice.
Rolled right over it in the four-wheel drive. Yep, thankfully my dad has become a hermit at his country property. He works from home, doesn't need his car anymore. Nice. So I boarded it. But it's all in the name of safety.
Your dad's living the life, though.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, working from home, living out there in the country. He wants to go for a walk. He just hikes his own property.
He's just doing all
Doesn't even have to talk to people. It's like living the dream for some.
I was surprised that you even made it in today with the little Honda Civic.
Oh, it's a 2009 Honda Civic, my friend.
It's a beaut.
That thing's a beauty. It's done well for me. Now, it's got no AC. Thankfully, though, it has heating. Honestly, it has no AC, no power locks. No. I don't even think you can get that anymore.
No seat warmer, no steering wheel heater, nothing like that.
No, sir. No, sir. I'm a rugged Canadian. Driving around in my little Honda Civic.
So it's rough. It's rough out there. All that to say, it's rough.
Yeah, well, do be careful. Of course, by the way, the city's done a pretty good job clearing up the snow so far. But I will say, even on the highway, really slippery conditions. So be careful out there. I know that eastbound, I believe it is about Rochester, had an accident a little bit earlier on. That's probably cleared up by now, but it's a slow go. I had no traffic on the way here, and I was going about 75 kilometers an hour. So, keep it low. Keep it slow. Tune into 1310 1011 FM. And just relax. Enjoy this entertaining show we've got ahead for you. Okay? One good thing about the snow, by the way, is sledding. Tobogganing is back. City of Ottawa has officially lifted its no sledding advisory, and that, of course, is after the tragic death of 11-year-old Jose Abi-Assal at Mooney's Bay earlier this month. Just a tragic accident. I believe it was December 27th. That accident, which happened when the hills were very icy, very little snow on them. It caused the city to issue a no sledding advisory and step up enforcement of the no sledding rule at Mooney's Bay. But with this fresh dump of snow, that's been lifted. The city has sent out a list of safety sledding tips, by the way, to remind us how to have fun safely this winter. So have a look at that. A little later on in the show, by the way, City Councillor Riley Brockington will join us to talk about where and how you can go tobogganing in Ottawa. I know they've put some safety measures in at Mooney's Bay. They're doing an assessment on that as well, a safety assessment. So we'll get caught up with Riley on that. The much-anticipated consumer inflation report. I don't know how much I anticipated it, to be honest with you.
Yay.
Yeah, it's here, hot inflation. Off the wires. Yeah. Woo. So what is it? What's our inflation rate for December, David?
It's 4.8%.
My God.
That's high.
That is high.
That's a 30-year high. The last time we had inflation like that was 1991.
91.
I was not even alive. And if you had bought a car in that area of time, that period in the history of this country, you may remember your 18% interest rate.
Yeah, no kidding.
Inflation is high.
Mortgage rates back in those 80s. Oh my! Thank goodness the mortgage rates aren't the same as the 80s. So what we're looking at is we're driving the faster pace of price growth in December. We're higher year over year. Prices for food. David just mentioned it. Passenger vehicles, housing, food. I don't know. On Monday during that snowstorm, I managed to dig. I did the usual shoveling, but why bother jumping in my car? I'm quite fortunate. I can walk to my local Metro but shelves were empty. I was looking for some pretty basics. Hey, where are the green onions? Oh, we're out. Have you got some ground pork? We're making some pork meatballs tonight. I'm here to get some ground. No, we don't have those either. Not the usual supply chain issues that we've seen during COVID. Just as a matter of fact, happened to be the fact that we were going through a major snowstorm and the guys couldn't get through. As I live in the Vanier, sort of North Vanier area, New Edinburgh area, and on my way to the metro, I helped push out 2 cars. I know, David, I'm a hero. Yeah. I know what you're thinking.
Hero Ottawa.
Not all heroes wear capes, David.
Yeah.
Some of us wear parkas.
Not all heroes talk about it on the radio, too.
That's for sure. Yeah. Some heroes are more humble than others. Is that what you're trying to say, David? Anyway, in those back streets, right, in those neighborhoods, all across Ottawa, it doesn't matter where you are, West End, East End, Centertown, it takes them a while to get there. So on my way back from the metro at Beechwood, there were 3 buses stuck trying to turn onto back roads. I don't know what you can necessarily do about it other than maybe say to people who are taking the bus, you know what, we have to stay on the major roads until things get cleared up. You'll have to take a short walk. But then you have people with mobility issues, right, that can't take those long, because the sidewalks weren't cleared, the roads weren't cleared. I don't know what to do. But 3 buses within a block from each other stuck. What are we going to do about this?
Like, okay, 1 bus I can understand. Even 2 buses I can understand. You see that you're the driver of the second bus. You see the first bus stuck. You go, well, maybe I can get around that. The third bus, maybe that guy just didn't feel like driving that.
I don't think it was all the same route either. So I think 2 of them were the same route. Like the one got stuck and the other bus decided, oh, you know what, I'll come and take care of your passengers. Not that he could get by because he was stuck right across the entire lane, both lanes of the street. So I don't know what I don't know what you can do about it.
It's a problem that seems to have no solution. It's been a problem in this city for the last 50 years and doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime fast.
And a guy in one of the fancy trucks that you're now driving, your father's truck, he pulled over and he had a winch on the front of his truck. And so he went over and he offered one of the bus drivers, you know what, I could probably pull you out. And he said he couldn't because of legal reasons.
Oh, yeah.
You can't just get any Joe Blow. You gotta make sure it's an OC Transpo
contract for that.
Contract.
Union rules and everything.
Oh, boy. It's back to school.
Yes, it is.
Kids are all back to school. And
Good for them. I'm sure they're loving that.
Oh, are you kidding me? Kids, listen, I don't know who loves it more, the parents or the children, right?
It's the parents.
I think so. I think you're probably right. But you brought this to my attention. I had seen the headline yesterday, but I did not read the full story. And some Ottawa high school students and parents are petitioning the city's largest school board to impose a grade freeze.
I love this.
Yeah. This is for the rest of the term because of the disruption and stress caused by the latest surge of COVID-19. The petition asks that any marks secondary students receive for assignments and tests from December 17th until the end of the semester in early February not be used to lower their final grade. However, marks would only be counted if they raised the final grade, which is quite convenient, David.
Oh.
Isn't that convenient?
What a novel policy. I like that one. Maybe they could just make that permanent.
I feel for students. I understand there has been many disruptions. It's affecting people's social life and mental health and even physical health, right? Because kids learning from home, online at home, I'm not sure if gym is part of the curriculum when you're learning online. Like,
I think it is.
Kids are doing like burpees?
They do like jumping jacks in the living room and run around the house. I don't know.
Well, maybe.
I think they
run
do
on
gym.
the spot.
I think they do gym.
Okay.
I don't know what it looks like. Probably looks pretty funny, but geez. Especially with these high school kids, though, they want their grades frozen. You're in high school. You can do it online. I'm in university right now. All these high school kids, they're all rearing to go to university. That's their point, right?
Right.
The point is, well, if we get bad marks, we're not going to get into university.
Of course.
What do you think you're going to be doing in university next year? It's all online. It's the same class. It's the same class.
They're just preparing you for post-secondary school. That's what you're trying to say here.
Except the difference in post-secondary school is when you don't hand in your assignment, you actually just fail. There's none of this, we'll
don't
accommodate you.
Yeah.
You actually just fail.
Could you extend the deadline for me, please?
But I will say hats off to these kids because it's a bold suggestion, and if they can make it work, power to them.
Agreed. I don't know. Well, I should let everyone know the Toronto District School Board, by the way, has already adopted this change. So It's not like this came. Yes, it's
I
not.
didn't even read that.
Yeah, it's not like it came out of nowhere. The changes already happened. I said on, I join Rob each and every Friday at 9:30, and we talked about schooling a little bit, and I said to him, this is. It's certainly difficult times. I would say when it comes to, we're all concerned about Omicron, right? Kids going back to school, the spread of it. High school students, I don't see the need for them to necessarily rush them back to school. Elementary school students, I understand 100%. It's very difficult to keep kids interested and engaged in online, in those elementary school age children. And you also have parents, by the way, that not everyone can work from home. And what the heck are they doing when their kids are working from home online and they've got to go to work and they have to balance these two things. So elementary, I just don't understand the rush with sending kids back. All right. There's the views on the news with David and Derek to start things off. By the way, we're going to do the Talk Back Hour. We do it each and every day from 10 to 11. Oh, yes. Today, we want to know if Omicron absenteeism is affecting you at work. Are you short-staffed? Are you run off your feet? Is COVID to blame? Call me after the 10 o'clock news. That's 613-750-1310. Coming up next, the Trudeau government has failed to meet an election promise to protect employers from lawsuits relating to vaccine mandates. Is it happening here in Ottawa? I'll speak with a local employment lawyer after the break. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
Keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off today. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV filling in. And our topic that we're going to be discussing now is that employers across the country have begun firing employees who are not fully vaccinated against COVID-19. That's according to lawyers who say they are inundated with vaccine-related cases and claims of wrongful dismissal. This is going to be something we're going to be looking at, I would say, for quite a few years. I am joined today by Ottawa employment lawyer with Nelligan Law, Janice Payne. Janice, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Janice, so let's talk about from your perspective. Now, this is, what I just shared, this is sort of across the country, but from your perspective, what have you seen when it comes to vaccination mandates and, these wrongful dismissal claims? In your opinion, what have you seen so far in your experience?
So far, we're seeing much more activity in the unionized environment. There are grievances being filed, particularly by individuals who are annoyed at being put on leave without pay because of noncompliance with policies. So we are seeing activity there, and those are moving through the system. There have been some labor decisions at a higher level challenging certain aspects of vaccination policies. We are not yet seeing what I would call a wave of wrongful dismissal actions at all.
Okay.
Those would be more common in the non-unionized private sector. And while they're being talked about, and while we're anticipating that we're going to see these, along with human rights complaints related to unhappiness with not being given exemption from the vaccination policy on human rights grounds, there is not what I would call a wave of them yet. Yes, there have been terminations related to noncompliance with vaccination policies. In our experience, most of these are getting resolved. They're not yet proceeding to litigation. I'm sure it's coming.
Okay. So what would the difference be between a union grievance and a human rights complaint?
A unionized grievance, if there is a human rights aspect to the case, will include the complaint about a breach of human rights. Okay. So in a unionized, normally anyway, in a unionized environment, the union will assist employees with their grievances and will pursue the human rights remedies at the same time. In a non-unionized environment, employees might choose to file their own human rights complaints directly or pursue other legal remedies through the courts. That's what you would typically see without, of course, the assistance of a union.
So what would a court challenge process look like for something like this?
Well, what it might look like if individuals were pursuing it would be a claim for wrongful dismissal or constructive dismissal. Perhaps arguments that the vaccination policy is a substantial change to the terms and conditions of employment, entitling them to treat themselves as terminated. Perhaps including, again, complaints of breach of human rights, a failure to allow an exemption on religious or medical grounds, for example. So that's what you might see going through the courts. Once these get going, it will take a while, as you said at the outset, for these cases to get resolved with decisions. These cases can be subject to appeal.
Right.
Most will be settled, but it's going to take a while before we have a sense of what the legal precedents are going to be in this area.
Just a reminder to everybody, I'm speaking to Ottawa employment lawyer with Nelligan Law, Janice Payne. And Janice, it's also our understanding that there's no definitive court decision in Canada yet, right, on how vaccine mandates can be enforced in workplaces.
Well, we're getting some guidance from the labor adjudicators, who typically want to see some alternatives in the policy to vaccination where appropriate. So we're starting to see some decisions reviewing vaccination policies and in some cases sending them back for revision. Those are not precedents that bind us in the civil justice system, but they certainly give us some early guidance as to what neutral decision makers might do with these policies. We have seen some terminations upheld in the labor environment, but these cases often turn on their own facts. There may be something, and the case I'm thinking about involves somebody who was really flouting the policy and not being honest about his symptoms, and so a termination was upheld. So we are starting to see guidance there, but nothing that is truly binding yet. It is going to take a little while.
I think what's interesting as well that we have seen that, workers that can work from home are even getting involved in this, where an employer has still let them go regardless of whether they're working in the office or working from home because they're not complying with their vaccine mandate. Could an employee use the argument that they work from home and therefore would not be putting any of their colleagues at risk?
Employees are trying to use that argument. We're seeing that.
Okay.
But the law is fairly clear that the right to work remotely is a privilege. It's not really a right. And it's something that the employer can allow if it chooses. Most employers will want to have some flexibility with respect to working from home. They may be happy with the individual working from home some of the time, but it's important to most employers that they be able to come into the office, able to meet with colleagues, clients, customers, whatever the situation is, when necessary. And so it isn't likely to be easy to challenge based on an alleged right to work from home when most of the time there isn't an absolute right at all.
Yeah, and I wonder if it depends on what role you're playing. Say you're, for instance, at a call center, something you could do from home, but maybe the employer could perhaps argue that at some point they need you to come in for, management meetings and this sort of thing for reviews. Could that argument hold any water?
Yes, I think it could.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about, what does legal precedent do in a case like this? So once there's one decision, let's say somewhere in Ontario, do the dominoes start falling from there?
No.
No, okay.
No.
Okay, interesting.
It's not unusual in employment law to see conflicting decisions at the initial level, at the trial judge level, for example. One trial judge in one case may take one view and another on similar facts quite a different view. These cases will, if they're not resolved, work their way up perhaps through appellate routes. And it's not really until you get a decision at the appellate level that you've got something that is binding on trial judges deciding these matters initially. No, the dominoes do not fall. And the important thing to remember, I mentioned it a moment ago, is so often these cases turn on their own facts, the particular wording of a collective agreement, the particular wording of contracts, the nature of the employer's business, the conduct of the employee. So cases differ.
Yeah.
And lawyers argue that decisions that have been made should not apply because of the difference in the facts.
And Janice, I wonder if one of the major issues is you perhaps would see, or it could be quite a regular instance, is that people are being terminated with cause, right? Meaning that they'd be denied severance. So do these employees have a case in pursuing severance pay?
They may.
Yeah.
They may. What we've seen so far, where there have been, not in every case, but in some cases where there have been terminations due to lack of compliance, employers are choosing not to terminate for cause and instead are offering some support to the individual to transition to the next job. Or severance packages, in other words.
Right.
So, yes, that's unresolved. And again, will probably depend on all of the facts in the particular case. But yes, there could be an argument for severance.
Yeah, certainly be interesting to continue following this. Really appreciate your time today, Janice. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Janice Payne, Ottawa employment lawyer with Nelligan Law. We're going to take a quick break here. Derek Fage here filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 13. And here's what's making news this hour. Keep in mind, we're in store for a bout of freezing rain or drizzle this afternoon. Once this snow changes over, temperatures will begin to climb very briefly in the late afternoon and early evening to just above zero. Then we return to a deep freeze. A winter travel advisory is in effect for this region due to the snowfall and the oncoming freezing rain. Inflation rate has not climbed as high as the United States and Canada, but it is still the highest in our country since 1991. Prices in December climbed by an average 4.8%, slightly higher than the climb back in November. StatsCan says that is thanks to higher prices for food, gasoline, and housing. The Premier is hosting big city mayors from across the province today. They're trying to figure out a solution to the high cost of housing. City News Time, 9:34. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Well, hello there, Ottawa. Welcome back to the show. Rob Snow off today. Derek Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa, filling in. It's time for your political fix. But before we get to our guest, let me just talk a little bit about this editorial in the Globe and Mail. Oh, my goodness, poor Erin O'Toole. Tearing him to shreds here today. Let me just read a couple of things here from the editorial in the Globe. So they start off, what is the role of the official opposition in Canada's Parliament? The straightforward answer is that it is to ensure, as the House of Commons website puts it, that legislation is carefully considered and that differing views on important initiatives are publicly expressed and defended. Above all, the official opposition serves as a government in waiting and its leader as a ready replacement for the sitting prime minister. Which means, and they go on to say, which means it's safe to say that Conservative leader Erin O'Toole lately isn't keeping Prime Minister Justin Trudeau awake at night. And they go on to talk about some of his missteps, of course, when it comes to the pandemic. Mr. O'Toole last week used his podium to ask for understanding and accommodation for the roughly 1 in 10 adults who are unvaccinated. And the editorial goes on with, when it comes to the greatest crisis to face the country in decades, the Prime Minister in waiting has been either absent from the discussion or making poor choices. An Abacus poll of 2,200 Canadians this month found that he has by far the lowest approval rating among party leaders at just 21%. Now, basically, Justin Trudeau is not necessarily having to look over his shoulder because the official opposition isn't forcing him to do so. Joining us for the political fix, Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corp, and Cam Holmstrom, consultant with Blue Sky Strategy Group. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Great to have you here.
Good morning.
Good
Always
morning.
Glad to be here.
Gary, let's start with you. So, you just heard the editorial. I just read a few excerpts from it. Is he being effective as a leader of the opposition, or as the Globe and Mail editorial is saying, he's been a colossal failure so far?
Well, that's a tough editorial to wake up to first thing on a snowy Tuesday morning for Erin O'Toole.
Indeed.
Look, January and December are sometimes tough times for opposition leaders. It's tough to garner attention on the issues that you really want to. I know when I was in opposition, we often used that time more for planning purposes than anything else. And I will say, too, it seems like there are some in the media who are more interested in holding the opposition to account than holding the government to account on a lot of issues.
Excellent point, yeah.
I'll add in, and the Globe and Mail editorial did note this, that virtual parliament is terrible for opposition parties because you don't have the regular agenda schedule, the cut and thrust of debate that you have. Mm-hmm. And, I think the issue that, O'Toole was responding to was the fact that in a media interview in Quebec, the Prime Minister called out people who are unvaccinated as racist and misogynist. And I don't think that's simply the case in all the cases.
No, I agree. That's poor leadership there, in my opinion.
Yeah. However, look, I agree with the editorial in one way, in the sense that I think this is not a great issue for, the Conservatives to try to seize on. I know there are some people in the Conservative caucus who have those views, and I think Mr. O'Toole is trying to placate some of those people to say, look, I will go out and I will raise those issues, and I probably will take some hits over it, but I'm listening to my caucus. The Conservatives need Parliament back to go after a number of other issues, like inflation, like the cost of housing, like the cost of daily living, and spending on government contracts, which are up from virtually nothing under the Harper Conservatives to millions and millions of dollars under this government, including contracts to McKinsey, formerly the land of Dominic Barton, who ended up as ambassador to China. There's lots of things for the Conservatives to go on, and they really need to find their mojo and really focus on these issues to try to hold the government to account.
Well, that actually was going to be my follow-up. Gary just stole a bit of my thunder, Cam, but I was going to say, so what would your top three, Cam, issues be that he really should be looking at and fighting for, for Canadians as the opposition leader and holding the Liberal government to account for?
Oh, there are issues on the table, and inflation is definitely one of them. But I guess here's the thing. I'll just turn your question a bit, Derek. Pardon me, but yeah. I don't think the problem so much is the issue as what you're having to say, what you're having to offer, which I think is what's undercutting O'Toole a lot right now in this moment. You take the issue of inflation; it's a great example. Yes, you're right to point out inflation is a problem, but they're offering no solution. They aren't even correctly diagnosing the problem itself. So it's like when people look at that, it's like, okay, I'm in pain, but you're not offering me anything. You're not offering me an alternative. Like you mentioned, if you're supposed to be a government in waiting, that means you're supposed to be offering me an alternate way to deal with this problem, to actually present a solution. And they're not doing that. And I think that, to me, eats into what he's dealing with, and that hurts him because he's not pleasing people in his own caucus, because we are seeing more and more people speaking out. Yeah. And honestly, I believe his lines are all about that. It's not about the general public at this point. It's not about becoming the next prime minister. It's ensuring that he keeps his leadership long enough to have a chance to be the next prime minister. Because when I hear some of those comments, because Gary mentioned it, these are some of the voices in his caucus, and right now they have an overpowered sway on him because he knows his position isn't totally secure. And I don't know how tenable that position is. I don't know how long you can keep that going. Trying to hold on to your caucus while eating into your reputation with the rest of the electorate. To me, it's sad to see because I obviously I don't agree with Mr. O'Toole on much of anything, but before all this, I found him to be a pretty moderate person, a pretty respectable person. Yeah. Someone who was the kind of person you wanted to see in political life, right? And that person's long gone, has kind of assumed himself in an attempt to try to hold on to this position, and it's almost a bit tragic to see play out because, you know what? It's like it says bad things about our politics, but at the end of the day, these are choices he's made. He could have chosen to go another direction. He could have chosen to stand up to those in his caucus who are fine with COVID running rampant. Like, he could have done those things, but he's chosen not to. And he's put himself in a nice little corner, and that's completely of his own making.
Yeah, Gary, Cam brings up some great points. I mean, we look at inflation. We all know Pierre Poilievre is, his tune by now. He's the finance critic, but it just seems he's yelling into the void now. If you listen to what Cam was saying, he's questioning, okay, that's great. Inflation is a huge problem. However, where are the solutions coming from the opposition? There seems to be no solutions. There just seems to be yelling at a problem and not bringing anything to the table.
Well, I actually think, Pierre, as finance critic, has been, asking some pretty tough questions about, the cost of inflation is being driven by, increased government spending on all sorts of areas, not just from COVID spending, but, this Liberal government has chosen to spend money and use the pandemic as an opportunity to spend money on all sorts of its pet projects. And, Pierre is very effective when he has, finance officials at a parliamentary committee and harnessing, asking questions like, where is the money coming from? And, you've got radio silence from people sitting there in the Department of Finance who can't answer the question, and, I think Pierre has been, using his role as a finance critic to say, at some point, government spending has to be wound down and there has to be a plan forward to, try to get government spending in check. And I think that is certainly, one of the solutions that Conservatives are offering. But I do agree with you that that's not enough. You have to actually put forward a plan. And, I'm hoping to see that the Conservatives use this time in January to really, gear up for the, February to June parliamentary sitting. That's how we always dealt with it in opposition in terms of forward planning and getting ready to bring forward new ideas, is to use that time in January when the House isn't sitting. You've got a little bit of downtime to focus on what are the issues we're going to raise in the next 4 to 5 months before the summer break. What are the tools are we going to use to bring those issues to attention, and what are the solutions that we're going to bring to Canadians? And so I'm hopeful that they're using this time wisely, and we'll see some of those things coming forward in February and onwards, especially as we have a budget this year. So I hope they're using this time wisely to do that. But I do agree with you that you can't just yell into the void. You do at some point have to bring proposed solutions and have them road tested by the public.
Well, and I think part of that void is the public as well, because, we're just inundated with what's happening in the pandemic or in numbers every day, and COVID is on top of everybody's mind. So when the opposition parties do try to capitalize on something, I'm not even sure that, Cam, that the public is necessarily listening to any of this. So we're going to change our tune coming up after the break. We'll look at the Trudeau government and what their strategy is right now or should be right now. Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corp, and Cam Holmstrom, consultant with Blue Sky Strategy Group, joining us for the Political Fix Part 2 after the break. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News.
Community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Rob is off today. This is Derek Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in. A reminder, we've got the Talk Back Hour coming up in just a few minutes. We want to know if this is happening to you where you work. We want to gather your reports this morning. We're attempting to trace the spread of Omicron in Ottawa via a call-in radio show. We're going to do this as a public service for you. So we've been hearing about it in the news for weeks now. Dire predictions that Omicron will have scores of people at home sick for 10 days at a time. Supply chains collapsing, grocery store shelves empty. We've been talking about it. Absenteeism ever since Dr. Kieran Moore said this particular thing back on January 3rd. We'll play that clip coming into our Talk Back Hour. So that's coming up. But we continue with our political fix, and we had our attention turned to the opposition, to Erin O'Toole, with a fairly scathing editorial in the Globe and Mail. Now we turn our attention to the Trudeau government? And if you're a Trudeau government, what should your strategy be right now? We are joined by Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corp, and Cam Holmstrom, consultant with Blue Sky Strategy Group. I'll start with you, Cam. If you are the Trudeau government, what is your strategy at the moment?
Oh, jeez. It makes me putting myself in the mindset of a liberal. You're hurting.
I know
me. You really are.
It's tough, Cam. That's why I started with you, Cam. To give you a bit of a brain freeze there this morning.
To be honest, for him, it's to keep moving. It has to be to keep moving, because the second that they stop, the second that they feel, the second that there's a lost momentum, I think that they're in trouble. Like, they're in this period where, as we point out, the official opposition is not in the greatest position to challenge them. They actually have an opportunity to actually get some things done with cooperation with either the NDP or the Bloc. So that's, at this point, just to keep moving, keep going. Because I think as soon as they stop, some of these problems that they do have, whether it be past ethical issues or whether it becomes the general disposition about how this government can operate, catches up to them, right? So to me, I think it's just keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And I think they're in a rare point of time where they can do it. Let's just face it, we just had a 2-year period where we had a parliament where very little governing was actually done because of COVID, right? It came in and tore us right off everything.
Yeah.
This might actually be the first real period of governing this government's had, this next 6 months to a year, that he's had in probably 3 years. So I think for them, they want to take advantage of that. And for that means movement, that means actual action. Because you know what? I think most people, especially most progressives, are quite disillusioned with all the talk and little action to back it up. And I think that's the thing that kind of needs to change for them. So by bringing action, I think they put themselves in a better position. So the only thing to throw that off is, basically, let's be honest, events around us. COVID getting worse, things happening between Ukraine and Russia, like all kinds of stuff going on that could throw a monkey wrench into all of this, right? So I think for them, just keep moving. Progress, getting things done, actually putting actions and taking advantage of this period of time.
And Gary, Cam mentioned, progressives, and they've got a lot of big ticket progressive agenda items they want to push through, of course, mainly, on the environment, climate ambitions, but no majority to do it. So they have to play nice with the opposition parties. I think they know who their allies are going to be when it comes to the environment. So do you see any of these big files like phasing out oil and gas subsidies actually coming to fruition before the next election?
I agree with Cam in a lot of ways that, the Trudeau Liberals have to govern like they've got a majority, because they essentially do on so many fronts.
Right.
And especially on the issues around environment, we know that Minister Guilbeault is going to be bringing forward some pretty big proposals. They've already moved on Christmas Day. They tabled regulations about banning certain types of single-use plastics. Got very little pickup in the media. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more pickup. The Bloc Québécois and the New Democrats will. They'll make noise and say it's, on any of the environmental issues, it's not fast or not far enough. But at the end of the day, I think you can pretty much count on them to support the agenda that the government puts forward, with only the Conservatives in opposition. I guess the real challenge for them is the risk of going too far and too fast in some of these things. It's not so much the political calculation in Parliament. It's, can you bring the public along? And, Minister Guilbeault, when he was Minister of Canadian Heritage and tried to bring in, major changes to rules around, social media and those sorts of things, he lost the communications battle because he was not able to communicate the government's position clearly. And so his biggest challenge may be himself in getting these things forward. So, that's the other thing. When you're proposing major change to Canadians, you also have to bring Canadians along. And the proof will be in the pudding to see whether or not they're able to do that. The other thing I'll say simply is that, it's the middle of January. This government, Cam talks about they should, move fast. We have seen the opposite of moving fast in this government. I mean, they're still trying to get staff in place in a lot of ministers' offices. This is not a government that has moved fast. It's 4.5 months since the last election. Parliament has barely sat, and offices are just getting kind of up and running now. So if you are looking for action from government, now is the time to see if they'll actually get things into gear.
Yeah, and Cam, it seems that, I was going to ask you if you thought Trudeau, does he have the patience to govern with this minority and when the next election will be? And I think he does have the patience, and I think Gary pointed out that very fact that he has been patient. He is sort of running along this fairly slowly. I think that's kind of strategic on his part. What do you think?
Oh, well, it is. Let's be honest. He has to look across the aisle and realize things could be a heck of a lot worse right now for him, right? Yeah. Sure, there are people quietly organizing, waiting for the day that he's got to decide, but no one's openly putting knives in his back or putting comments out there that he's now forced to defend. In relative terms, things are pretty good on the government benches. As I heard before, the worst day in government's better than the best day in opposition. So, and for him, I think he's also at the point of his career where it's legacy time, right? It's thinking about the legacy, thinking about those big things. And as Gary mentioned, the support's there. And honestly, I think the one thing you'll see is that I don't think it's going to be like last time where it was mostly coming from the NDP. I think you're going to see the NDP support on some things, the Bloc support on other things. I think there's going to be a little bit more pushback, but not enough to stop things from actually happening. And I think that's the key thing for him. This is an opportunity to kind of build the legacy. And if he decides to take his own walk in the snow before the next campaign, at least he'll be able to walk away and say, look, I've done my best. Here's what I accomplished. And I think that's what's in his mind right now. It's legacy time.
Yeah. Let's wrap up with something on the lighter side. Maybe we could call it Chairgate, Chair Scam. I'm not sure what we should call this one, but Jagmeet Singh's very expensive rocking chair scandal. If people aren't aware, the NDP are now working with the ethics commissioner and intend to file a formal disclosure of the $1,895 rocking chair given to Jagmeet Singh's wife in exchange for posting about it. And then, of course, he posts a picture. Is there anything to this? Is this going to be one of those news items, Gary, that is going to last about 30 seconds and we move on to the next thing?
It's a great story for January for sure. And the country singer George Jones had a song, "I Don't Need Your Rockin' Chair," and that should have been in Mr. Singh and his wife's mind when they got this offer. Look, Mr. Singh pulls down almost $250,000 a year as a member of Parliament and as a leader of the New Democratic Party. I've worked with a lot of ministers and MPs, and one of the first things you do with them and their spouse, you sit down and you say, okay, here's the rules. You can't accept a gift more than $200. So, that's a great story for January. But you know what? For the New Democrats, any time that Mr. Singh or the NDP gets up on an issue on ethics in the House of Commons, I mean, if I'm a liberal, I'm heckling back. I'm singing "Rockabye Baby." It gives the liberals a bit of a free pass, and the whole thing's just kind of skeezy in my view. You post a picture of their newborn in order to get a free chair. It's just. The whole thing is just a little bit odd.
That's what all the influencers are doing, Gary. All the influencers. Yeah, that's how they get their free garbage.
When you're a member of Parliament, your job is to be a member of Parliament, not to promote merchandise.
I agree. Cam, what do you think about this one?
Well, obviously, it's not helpful, and I wish maybe they had thought better about what they'd done. But I'd point out too is that at the end of the day, it was his wife who was approached. It was and you're right.
Yes,
that's
true.
Influencer, and honestly. This is one of those. This is the real 2022 kind of thing, right? Because who would have thought of this even 10 years ago that this would even be the kind of situation that someone would actually pay someone here, take pictures in my chair, that. Even to think of that back then, the rules were never meant to deal with that. But at the same time, look, you goofed up, you messed up, you admit it, you move on. And I give them credit for that. I say, we'll pay for it, fine. We'll pay for the chair, right? Again, it's an $1,800 chair. They can afford it, and they'll pay it, and that'll be that. But Gary's right. You know what? Yeah, this will be one of those things. It'll come up. It'll be a backhand slap every now and again. But you know what? It's one incident involving an $1,800 rocking chair compared to all of SNC-Lavalin and We Charity and I'm sorry, if all of a sudden Jagmeet Singh's partner's $1,800 rocking chair somehow is equivalent to all of Mr. Trudeau's partner's paid work with We, or his mother's work with We, or his brother's work with We. Come on now. I can do the math, and the math is pretty uneven there.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes it's slow in the news, in January, as Gary pointed out. And these stories, they don't last long, but they do add for some entertainment. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
With you.
All right, take care. That is Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corp, and Cam Holmstrom, consultant with Blue Sky Strategy Group. Coming up after the break, it's your hour, the 10 o'clock hour. It is the Talk Back Hour. We'll be back. Don't forget, 613-750-1310 is the number. Are people showing up to your work? Is it throwing a wrench into what you do? We want to hear about it. Want to hear? Get the word out there. Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace, especially if you're in the business of supply chain, shipping, receiving, delivering, transporting? We want to hear from you. Give us a call, 613-750-1310. Derek Fage here filling in for Rob Snow on City News.
WW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15, in Smiths Falls, minus 13. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Inflation hit 4.8% in December across Canada, and in Ottawa, the rate was slightly higher, 5.4%. The last time the national rate was this high was December in 1991. Main drivers for the price growth, higher year-over-year cost for food, passenger vehicles, and housing. Prices at the gas pumps also shot up over 33% in December 2020, but that was lower than November's 43.6% annual increase. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says it will take province-wide collaboration to tackle the housing crisis and boost the housing supply. Ford spoke this morning at the start of a virtual housing summit with Ontario municipalities, saying he hopes this event is going to be productive.
As is often the case, while the solutions may seem obvious, implementing them takes a lot of hard work and determination.
Now, Ford says his government will provide more than $45 million in funding to help Ontario's largest cities cut red tape and streamline development approvals. City News Time, 10:03. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Snow will taper to flurries late morning, some more flurries for the afternoon, and a risk of some freezing rain or drizzle as well. A shifting wind from the east-northeast to the southwest and will rise to -1 this evening, but then drop off sharply overnight. Will drop to -20 for the low. For today, the high this evening, -1.
And right now in Ottawa, -15. It's -13 in Smiths Falls. The city will be getting some added revenue from the province. MPP Mary-Lee Fullerton's office says it's almost $38.5 million being sent to Ottawa to support transit. Now, that cash is above the gas tax revenue of 2 cents a litre the city does receive. That money, though, was made available after greatly reduced gas sales due to the COVID pandemic, and restrictions meant less revenue from that particular source. It's being called a significant update on the murder of Greg Slewage. The OPP providing an update later on this morning. The 39-year-old was found dead the morning of Thursday, September 24th, 2020. His body found in a building that had been converted to a legal marijuana grow-op in Beckwith. City News Time, 10:04. Major international airlines have now canceled flights heading to the United States or changed the planes they're using for the flights. The move represents the latest complication in a dispute over concerns 5G mobile phone service could interfere with aircraft technology. Some airlines say they were warned the Boeing 777 is particularly affected. David Koenig reports the airline industry accuses U.S. telecom giants and the FCC of downplaying their concerns.
The aviation industry says we tried to raise these issues before and the Federal Communications Commission didn't take us seriously or didn't give us their full attention, didn't do anything in regard to the concerns that we raised.
Now, it's not clear how disruptive the cancellations will be. And the University of Michigan has reached a $490 million settlement with 1,050 survivors of Dr. Robert Anderson's sexual abuse. They accuse the late University of Michigan doctor of abusing them while he was on staff between 1966 and 2003. That case broke around the same time as accusations against Larry Nassar by members of the women's gymnastics team in the United States. It did not receive nearly the same attention. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Derek Page here, filling in for Rob Snow. That's right, it is the Talk Back Hour. You heard right there. That's the number, 613-750-1310. What are we going to talk about today? Well, Omicron and absenteeism. Something that David and I wanted to discuss with you today. We've been hearing about it in the news for weeks now. Dire predictions that Omicron will have scores of people at home sick for 10 days at a time. Supply chains collapsing. Grocery stores, shelves empty. We've been talking about Omicron and absenteeism ever since Dr. Kieran Moore said this on January 3rd.
At any given time in the coming weeks, we can expect across all sectors 20 to 30% absenteeism as a result of Omicron spreading so rapidly across Ontario.
20 to 30%. That's what the doctor said 3 weeks ago. 20 to 30%. Huge number. We want to know, is this happening to you where you work? Want to gather your reports this morning? We're attempting to trace the spread of Omicron in Ottawa via call-in radio. We are doing this, my friends, as a public service to you, fellow citizens. 613-750-1310. Are people not showing up to your work? Is it throwing a wrench into what you do? We want to hear about it. Want to get the word out here if we can. Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace? Are you working at a grocery store and you're double shifting because people aren't showing up? You know, if you're in the business, especially if you're in the business of supply chains, shipping, receiving, delivering, transporting, we want to hear from you. Hey, if you work from home, are people not logging in as usual? Maybe your Zoom meetings, you're not seeing as many people as you used to see. Are you picking up their slack at all? 613-750-1310. I think this may be a bigger problem right now than many people realize. I think it might be sneaking up on us. Even though we were warned about it, this could be sneaking up on us. Take a look at the news this morning. One of our top stories here at City News is about school bus cancellations. So you want to talk about work shortages? Not unusual for school buses to be canceled this time of year, but today's cancellations aren't because of the snow. They're because of a shortage of drivers. And it's major. Ottawa school bus operator issued a statement Tuesday warning of expected service disruptions in its area because of COVID-19 concerns. Hundreds of kids in our region who can't get to school today because their bus drivers are off work or, trying to figure out, confusing self-isolation rules. We have some lines open. 613-750-1310. Give us a call. Let's head over to Phil. Phil in Ottawa. Phil, what do you think about have you experienced this at all in your workplace?
Well, I'm not employed now. I've chosen to self-isolate, and I think that's probably the prudent thing to do.
Have you tested positive, Phil?
No, and I got to disclose. I'm one of the space cadet non-vax. I'm the guy who won't take the vaccine for whatever reason.
Okay,
I won't disclose that now. But
all right.
I think there's a shortage of work people in the workplace because they're doing exactly what I'm doing, and it'd be interesting to get a feel and of the demographic of that.
Yeah, I agree, Phil. And I wonder, so Phil, how are you looking after yourself? How are you paying the bills at the moment?
Well, I'm doing probably what a lot of people are doing, living on equity of the house and savings, and and I'm not complaining. I'm not crying about it. And that's the choices I choose to make. I choose not to be around people that could potentially infect me or be infected or be an infector. Pass the disease. So it's a choice that I made, and I think that's where we're losing sight of the whole conversation. Is do we give up that choice? Do we I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong for taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine, or anybody is.
Okay.
But at least I've made my choice.
Well, what is the field that you work in, Phil?
I'm in transportation.
Oh, you're in transportation. Okay, so yeah. Yeah,
and I have friends that are running stateside that have lost their job because they refuse to take the vaccine, and that's probably you can run a whole show on just the effect of that. I think there's going to be in the very near future there's going to be some consequences to saying to somebody that sits in a truck for 10 hours, never sees anybody all day, goes to a destination, unpins his trailer, and turns around and comes back to get home. That now we got to stick a needle in your arm, and they refuse to do that and say, you know what, I'd rather just stay home, thanks. I remember they were talking about giving us a washroom break in the States, and that was some novel and grand thing they were going to do. This. The way people think it's bizarre.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, someone like yourself, people in the transportation, field and industry, truckers, I think this is going to be something that we continue to see. I'm just looking at the newspaper right now, and here on the front page of the National Post is consumers will pay for truckers' mandate. Minister defends tough border rules on vaccinations amid warnings of shortages and price hikes. We're seeing it in the healthcare field as well, Phil, that Quebec is saying tens of thousands of healthcare workers are off at the moment. Phil, thanks so much for your call. I'm going to take another call here. Let's head over to Chris in Canada. Chris, have you experienced this at all in your workplace?
Yeah, last week my roommate and I had to take the 5-day Ottawa health vacation while my wife had COVID.
Right, and of course somebody has to fill in for you, right? And we're seeing a huge shortage across the board. It doesn't even seem to matter what industry it is. We're seeing a huge shortage. So, I can imagine too, people are probably feeling guilty as well for putting their, some of their colleagues and fellow workers in difficult situations where they have to work longer hours or double shift.
Yeah, I did for sure. My roommate works at a grocery store full time. I deliver parts, and she works at Service Ontario. So really, all three of our jobs are directly impactful regardless of shutdowns.
And have you seen, are you guys in your line of work where you work at the moment, are they looking for people? Is there a shortage regardless across the board right now?
Grocery stores, definitely.
Yeah.
But Service Ontario seems to do okay. And I'm a singular driver for a company, so it's one of the other guys just had to step up last week while I was off. But if she wasn't vaccinated, she would have been in the hospital because she was on her butt for about 4 days of the last 7.
Oh, really? Unbelievable, yeah. And I think we're going to continue to see this. Chris, thanks very much for the call. Really appreciate it. I mentioned too, the news this morning of the school buses canceled just outside of the Ottawa area here, due to the rise of COVID-19 cases, an increase in service disruptions affecting multiple routes. Over the past weekend, they learned that 20-plus drivers will not be returning to service either temporarily or permanently. So you got hundreds of kids in our region who can't get to school because their bus drivers are off work. Some of them are off work because they're self-isolating. Others don't even want to work. Right in that field at the moment, you've got a busload of kids. You certainly, everybody's everybody's wearing masks, and the bus drivers doing their best to socially distance, I guess, as best they can. There's not much you can do in a contained bus, and so it's not a very attractive field of work at the moment. And it's not just happening on a small scale. Over the past few weeks, there's been signs all over that Omicron is hitting Canadian workers hard. Last week, the wildly popular clothing chain Lululemon Athletica signaled to investors that it was experiencing the impact of employees isolating due to COVID-19. Company said that its full-year earnings are going to come in on the lower end of expectations thanks to a series of pandemic-related concerns. So we want to hear from you. Again, 613-750-1310. Are people not showing up to your work? Is it throwing a wrench into what you do? Whether it's professionally or even personally, we want to hear about it. Want to get the word out. So call us, 613-750-1310. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. The other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30-odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. It's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, it was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. It's running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
On The Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
The Rob Snow Show continues, minus the Rob Snow portion of the show, because Rob is off today. Derek Fage here, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in. We're asking you, are people not showing up to work? We're doing this as a public service. We're trying to trace this new variant, find out how it's affecting people. Is it throwing in a wrench in your personal or professional plans? We want to hear about it. Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace? How is that affecting you? Are you having to do extra hours, or maybe you're refusing to do extra hours and they are short-staffed because you're already working a full week? Especially if you're in the business of supply chain, shipping, receiving, delivering, transporting. We heard from trucker. We heard from grocery store worker a little bit earlier on in the show. Again, our number, 613-750-1310. And even if you work from home, are people not logging in as usual? Or you show up at your local grocery store and there's 2 caches open and there's 100 of you in the grocery store and you just can't believe that there's just nobody there, right? Are you seeing empty shelves at the grocery store that are directly related to the pandemic? I know on Monday I walked to my local Metro and asking a couple of, fairly regular items that they would have on the shelves, and they said, well, not necessarily because of. Okay, I was looking for ground pork and some green onions.
Ground pork?
I was making meatballs.
Oh, living high on the hog at the Fage house.
What are you talking about? Pork is probably the cheapest of the meats right now, isn't it?
What's wrong with ground beef? What's wrong with good old-fashioned
ground beef? You see the price of beef right now?
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Ground pork's the way to go, friends.
Learn how to grind it yourself. Get into meat grinding? That's a good pandemic activity,
yeah, that's not a bad idea. We've got one of those fancy KitchenAids. Maybe I could get the meat grinder attachment.
Okay, Derek, we get it. You're doing well. All right. Well,
what are you talking about? KitchenAid isn't some kind of luxurious item, is it? Maybe it is.
No, it's pretty standard. Maybe it's pretty stock.
Okay, all right. And there's probably some knockoff brands. You don't have to buy the KitchenAid necessarily, right? You get that. What do they have? They have now the spiralizer attachment. I don't know what that goes for.
I think I probably spend less time with the KitchenAid than you do, so I'm out of my depth here.
What? Do you not prepare meals at home, David?
I don't use the KitchenAid.
Okay.
No.
All right. It's a great tool. It's a great tool to use in meal preparation. All right, let's get back on topic here, Derek. My goodness. We're asking, are people not showing up at your work? Are you being affected by it? Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace? 613-750-1310. Let's head to another David, not our David, but another David, probably a more important David. David in Ottawa, what are your thoughts on this? Have you been affected at all?
Well, no, I haven't been affected because I don't believe the fear propaganda. So the people who are already wearing masks are living in fear. You can see them walking around them outside. You can see them.
Are they shaking? Shaking, David?
Well,
they're like uncontrollable
They're not shaking yet. They're not shaking yet. So when it comes to them going to work, of course, they're going to take every opportunity to bail on work, right? They can get a little subsidy, and that the government's going to work along with them.
But it's not. It's not a lot of money, David.
Well, you know what? Here's the challenge to Ottawa business owners.
Okay.
You're talking about that PCR test for $250.
Oh yeah.
So we should buy like 20 of those things. Even buy 10 of them. We'll give the PCR test to a dog, a cat, a mouse, a rat. That's why you won't die in a little gnat. Okay. And we'll see how many positives we get. So if you're relying on on poorly set up tests that are producing false positives or positives, right? Everything's positive, no matter what you test it. So of course people are going to stay home. But people are actually paying money for this stuff. You really have to believe the propaganda to go pay for something you're vaccinated against to see if you're sick.
I see.
None of it makes sense.
Okay. Thanks for your call, David. Really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Well, we know that perspective right there, right? This is my issue with, people that are, don't believe in the masks and social distancing. Like, I just don't understand why it's a big deal. You go to the grocery store, how long are you spending in the grocery store? I mean, in the Home Depot, to wear your mask for 15, 20, 30 minutes inside a grocery store, your local hardware store, and then as soon as you get out, you take it off. It doesn't bother me. I don't understand it. I don't think, we're all lemmings and sheep and following. I mean, sometimes we think the government is trying to use these things to control us. They are not. They would rather, I can tell you, this is like 100% guarantee, the government would rather not be in a pandemic spending historical amounts of money due to the pandemic and having to shut down businesses to try. Now, you know what? Lockdowns, I'm not sure that they work. The numbers seem to show sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, so I'm not necessarily saying that. But the government does not want to be in this position. The government did not get us, worldwide governments did not get us in this position so they could have more control over us. They would rather this was not happening and it was business as usual for all of us. There's my opinion on it. All right. We've got some calls here, but we have one line open, 613-750-1310. Let's head over to Beverly in Ottawa. Beverly, have you been affected by this at all? Have are people not showing up at your work? Have you been affected professionally or personally?
No, not professionally at all. I work, our company has, we're following the Ontario guidelines, so they're having us all work from home remotely. They installed a new server system on all of our computers so that we could do it really efficiently. Actually,
Excellent.
Our company is great, yeah. But my husband, on the other hand, is a teacher, a public school teacher.
Ah, yes.
And so he's not actually a full-time teacher. He's an occasional teacher because he's still working through the system. And he's been super affected. He's been off for 5 weeks. He only went back yesterday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I also wanted to just make a comment that all the PPE and everything that we were told went out to all the schools, et cetera,
yeah.
the N95 masks, they're not in the schools.
Yeah, and I'm. It's so frustrating, Beverly, because they tried. They tried to do this too at the the LCBOs. They said they were going to have all these test kits available, and I don't understand because they said it. The Ontario government said, "Oh, by the way, on Monday, on the return to school, we're going to be sending out PPE." Well. Sending it out on the Monday isn't necessarily helpful for kids going back immediately. It takes a while to get, as we've seen, right? As we've seen with supply chain issues, it takes a while for things to get somewhere. Where were they 2 weeks ago? Why weren't they shipped 2 weeks ago? It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, agreed. So they're also asking for all the retired teachers, which, they're not going to come back because they're in a bad age group for Omicron. So they're not going to come back into the school system. And we kind of chuckle in this house and say, well, there's lots of younger teachers available wanting to go to work. So let's just get them back and get them working.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Beverly, thanks so much for the call. Really appreciate it.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye now. A reminder, our number, 613-750-1310. We want to know, is this happening where you work? Trying to gather some information from you, attempting to trace the spread of Omicron. Are people not showing up to your work? Is it throwing a wrench into what you do? We want to hear about it. Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace? We've seen the bus situation here in the Ottawa region. A number of students, you're talking about hundreds of students, just can't get to school today because their bus drivers are off work for various reasons. Whether they're self-isolating or there's increasingly confusing self-isolation rules as well. And some people are just they're not interested in that kind of work. Lululemon, a big company, issuing warnings about worker shortages last week. They weren't the only one. Metro, the parent company of drugstore chain Jean Coutu, said in a statement on its website recently that it's adjusting staffing models at the retailer to minimize the impact of absenteeism on its operation. So on the supply chain side of things, some of the country's biggest industry groups are warning about the impact of absenteeism. We want to know if this affects you. Again, 613-750-1310. We're going to take a quick break. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News.
News in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 12. And here's what's making news this hour. The province reporting a slight decrease today in the number of people in hospital with COVID, down by 51 from yesterday to 4,132. However, those in the ICUs is up by 9, now 589 needing that treatment. Also, 60 more deaths in Ontario being blamed on the virus. Just over 5,700 new cases province-wide of the testing done. 244 of those cases are in Ottawa. 51 in Eastern Ontario. Leeds, Grenville, Lanark has 31, 19 more cases in Renfrew. The cost of everything seems to be going up, and that has been confirmed by StatsCan this morning. It says prices went up an average 4.8% in December compared to 1 year ago. In Ottawa, a rate went up even more than that, costing you 5.5% more last month for things like food, cars, and housing. The city getting an added revenue stream from the province. Almost $38.5 million will be sent to the city to support transit. That cash is above the tax revenue from gas of 2 cents a litre. That was severely reduced due to COVID pandemic and restrictions. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV, filling in for Rob today. Before we get to some more calls and we set up to today's Talk Back Hour topic, should let you know we're waiting on a news conference from Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore. The province says it is to provide an update on key public health and health system data and trends. So we're going to bring you some of that live when that begins. David's keeping an eye on that. And as far as our topic goes here, We're gathering your reports today on how Omicron exposure and isolation is impacting workers in Ottawa. Speaking of Dr. Kieran Moore, a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Kieran Moore had this to say.
At any given time in the coming weeks, we can expect across all sectors 20 to 30% absenteeism as a result of Omicron spreading so rapidly across Ontario. That's
a large number. 20 to 30%. So are you seeing that where you work? We want to know. 613-750-1310. Some big name companies already reporting that bottom lines are hurting, partially because so many staff have been on and off work due to isolation rules. Companies like Lululemon. I don't know if you know anything about Lululemon, the makers of $100 underwear, yoga pants, and shirts. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Listen,
you wear any Lululemon?
It's good quality stuff. I don't think I own anything Lululemon.
I know that like a Lululemon guy.
Really? Really?
I get Lululemon vibes from you.
Oh, really?
That's a bad thing.
Okay, I'm not sure how to take that, David. I know my wife swears by it. Now, I think she owns like 2 items, but she bought the 2 items like 15 years ago, and the quality is so good. She said that, 15 years later, here she is, still wearing it. So...
Fun fact, if you pop onto the Lululemon website now, it just automatically takes you to a webpage that says Valentine's Day gifts.
Really?
They're very subtle about that.
Oh,
and it's just women's products on the landing page.
Forget about the men, right, when it comes to Valentine's Day. Do you think we're a little forgotten around Valentine's Day, David?
Oh, I would say so.
I like flowers. I'd accept some beautiful roses. Now, my wife is good to me, but I know many men that often don't receive anything at all. Those poor men.
But my gosh, if Lululemon can't make money.
I mean, who can?
Right?
Right? I don't think they're hurting for revenue, by the way, everybody out there. I mean, their numbers are lower. They're obviously reaching out to their shareholders. The most important part of the company, right, is the shareholders, those people you've never met in your entire life. Right? Got to make sure you keep the shareholders happy. Employees, customers and consumers, but shareholders, my goodness, we apologize. We will raise the price of our $100 underwear and yoga pants so that we can bring in more revenue so that you can get a better return for your dollar and we can, pay out those dividends. Metro, by the way, parent company of drugstore chain Jean Coutu, also said in a statement on its website recently that it's adjusting staffing models at the retailer to minimize the impact of absenteeism. So we want to know if you've been affected. Have you been affected? Let's head over to Joel from Limoges. Joel, how are things going out there in Limoges?
Things they're as you would expect. So I drive commercial truck.
Okay.
And but in the company I ended, and the problem isn't that we're not having trouble keeping drivers.
Okay.
There's not enough drivers still in the market.
I see. So there's not enough drivers in general. You're like many industries that are seeing shortages regardless of the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. And I did my trucking course last winter, and everyone that was in my class already had companies they were going to work for, and who paid their course entirely. So everyone who's coming out of trucking school already have jobs going out.
Right.
But there's been a driver shortage for the last couple of years because of the older generation retiring.
Yeah, we see that in the trades too, Joel. So what is your work day like? Like what sort of hours are you having to work now?
So right now, I haul grain, and I'll get on the road at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be back home at 5 o'clock. And it's all regional, Ottawa to Montreal or Ottawa to Johnstown, but there's always been this issue of lacking of drivers, and COVID has really just amplified it due to the demand of product.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you're on the road today, Joel. What's the weather like? What are the roads like out there for you?
The roads are wet. They're not too bad. I just spotted an accident on the northbound 416.
Okay.
Between Kempville and Spencerville exit.
Joel, stay safe out there. Really appreciate the call. Thanks so much for calling in.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Regardless of the pandemic, as Joel said, even before the pandemic, you're seeing shortages of workers. I mentioned the trades we've talked about on this show, and I know Sam LaPrad's talked about it. I mean, in industries right across the board, some serious shortages, and which also means some great opportunities. On the supply chain side of things, some of the country's biggest industry groups, by the way, are warning about the impact of absenteeism. I want to remind you, 613-750-1310. This is the Talkback Hour. Give us a call. Let us know if you've been impacted at all, at your place of work. Are you seeing shortages? Are people, getting sick and having to self-isolate, and you're having to work extra hours? So give us a call on that. As I said, some of the biggest industry groups are warning about the impact of absenteeism. Dennis Darby, who's the CEO of Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, recently told the Toronto Star that even though many manufacturers are just starting back up after the holidays, he's already hearing about a higher rate of worker absences. Anecdotally, he said he believes it's somewhere between 6 and 9% of workers in that sector. And another reminder as well, we're waiting for on a news conference from Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore. We're going to bring you some of that live. It's supposed to start, actually it was supposed to start just after 10:30, so we're still waiting on that. Surprise, surprise.
Nothing yet.
Yeah, shocking.
Yet.
Shocking. Politicians that are running late. Shocking. All right, let's take some of your calls. We have a couple of lines open, 613-750-1310. We have Ron from Toronto calling in. Ron, how are things in Toronto? What's the weather like out there? Have you called in the Army yet? What's going on?
No, I'm on my way to Toronto.
Oh, okay, you're on your way to Toronto. Sorry, Ron.
I'm actually just about to pass for the fellow that called before. I'm on the 416, it's fine.
Okay.
MTO usually does a great job. I have no beef with them. So first, welcome to the club, Derek.
Thank you very much.
And we've had no issues, most of us, since 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We got COVID, we got sick, we got better. This panic is outrageous. We spoke before, and I said all jobs were essential, all businesses were essential.
Right.
Should have been doing what Florida did, and I don't know why we didn't. So we're not getting sick. We've already had COVID. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess, Ron, the real reason for it all, I guess, is to protect everyone, the health and safety of everybody. I mean, you mentioned Florida. I mean, is Florida really better off? I mean, look at the numbers when it comes to deaths in ICUs and people in ICUs.
I think that we're pretty darn close per capita, and I know that their kids have been in school for 2 years without masks. And their kids aren't having mental issues or aren't going through what our kids are going through. I think it's outrageous.
Yeah.
For something that's it's not a death sentence. People need to realize that.
Well, it is for some, though, Ron. That's the problem, right? I mean, there's a reason why approximately 5.4 million have died worldwide.
Absolutely, of course.
It's incredibly contagious.
Walensky said it, 75% of all COVID deaths had 4 or more comorbidities, Derek. So how many of those had 3 or more, and 2 or more, or 1 or more?
I don't disagree with you, Ron, but I would say, if it's your family member, your friend, your parent,
I would protect them. Protect them, and that's what we should have done. And we didn't. We locked up 98% of the population to protect 2. It was ridiculous. We could have protected the seniors. We could have kept kids in school. We could have done this properly.
Ron, I do appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for calling today. Really appreciate it. We're calling to ask you if you've been affected. If you've been affected, especially in your workplace, are people not showing up for work? Have you been affected professionally or even personally? Where you've gone to your local grocery store and staffing is such that there's longer lineups, less cashiers open. Are you a frontline worker? Do you have shortages at your workplace? If you're in the business of supply chains, such as shipping, receiving, delivering, transporting, we want to hear from you. Heck, even if you work from home, are people not logging in? Maybe there's people not logging in. Oh my goodness, they're self-isolating. They're so sick in bed. And I have to say, I contracted COVID-19 just before Christmas. Down and out for probably about 5 days. So 3 days of very severe flu-like symptoms, aches, body aches, fever, hot flashes, a little bit of nausea, not as much nausea, but in extreme fatigue. So I was bedridden for probably about 5 days, probably slept 17 hours a day for the 5 days, and then slowly regained my energy and my health, and was able to, of course, isolate for 10 days. My family, thankfully, my wife and my 2 kids, all of them tested negative. We did a couple of tests over the course of that 10-day period. So, I happen to be actually fortunate in that I was on a holiday break. However, if I wasn't, I would have been out of work, and I'm a contract worker. If I don't show up, I don't get paid. I don't get vacation. I don't get sick days. So I understand where a lot of people are coming from. It's an incredibly difficult time, and we appreciate, by the way, all opinions on this show. So we just ask that you be respectful. Again, we are waiting on a news conference from Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore. We want to know, of course, about what it's like for you in your workplace. Is there shortages? We've got a couple of lines open. Jessica, hold on the line here because we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Jessica from Orleans, but give us a call, 613-750-1310. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise. And people, and for us, we have to be careful, especially with the virus going on. Did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. Earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors, or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy, because we have to shut down completely, And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can go online. Let's say T-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit, but when it comes to clothing. It's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really wanna shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You wanna be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, or they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show. Derek Fage here from Rogers TV, filling in for Rob Snow. Thanks for tuning in, by the way, to us on Rogers TV and, of course, here on 1310 and 101.1 FM. We are asking you, have you been affected? Have you been affected by work shortages at your work? Have you seen, people off sick and calling in sick and having to self-isolate? We're going to take a quick call because we want to head over to Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore, who are doing a media conference at the moment. But let's take one more call before we go. Jessica from Orleans. Jessica, have you been affected at all?
Hi, yes. We've been affected tremendously right now. I'm in the transportation industry for automotive.
Okay.
I work in Ottawa, and we do all the outskirts, such as going as far as Cornwall or the Quebec side, Perth, etc. And the amount of our workers that have gotten COVID are probably 75%.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think there's only 3 or 4 of us that haven't contracted it, and I'm very thankful to be one of them. And it's been extremely difficult because we have to pick up our slack for each other.
Yeah, for sure.
And we don't expect anybody to feel guilty for not coming in. Like, we want them to be healthy and safe. And, we had one of our workers that ended up in hospital. And it's very scary to think that, somebody so close, because where you work, you're spending more than 8 hours. And although we're on the road, we're still family. We're a work family.
Yeah.
So it's really hard in that sense. And like a previous caller said, it's not that we're short on workers. We're not getting enough workers. We need more workers. We need people to come in.
You need more workers in
to
general,
work.
regardless of even with having 75% of your staff having to take time off because they've contracted COVID. And you're right. I mean, there are a lot of emotions that go through it. I mean, for somebody like myself that had COVID, especially over the holidays, there's a bit of guilt associated with it that we had to postpone our holiday celebrations and that kind of thing. It makes it difficult. And then, of course, like people like yourself who are close to your colleagues, and you end up with a colleague in hospital. It's scary times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to give a quick kudos too for our management. Our management has come in when they don't play the role of a warehouse shipping, receiving, or a truck driver, and only having slept maybe 10 minutes, and they have to work 24 hours straight because there's nobody else to come in, and they were able to pick up that slack. So a big kudos to the management in all industries, because who really picks up the slack, right? Like, you're not going to call somebody that just does trucking and isn't trained in every department. So we really have to be thankful for the ones who really put themselves out.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Jessica, thanks so much for the call.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Thanks, you too. All right, we're going to go live to Queen's Park for an update from Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore.
Ontarians have also continued to make good use of this time by rolling up their sleeves, and we are leading the country in getting boosters into arms. Our government issued a call to action to get as many vaccines into arms as possible, and Team Ontario has answered that call. The capacity is in place, and appointments are available for Ontarians who want to get their vaccines sooner. I continue to urge everyone to get their first, second, and booster shots as soon as they can. Another exciting positive step is the recent Health Canada approval of Paxlovid, an antiviral medication. We are expecting to receive a very limited supply of just over 10,000 courses of treatment for January. We are working with Ontario Health to distribute this supply at a number of sites across the province as soon as it's received, helping to further protect our hospital capacity by prioritizing those at highest risk of severe outcomes. So I know that this has been a very long and difficult road for the people of Ontario. You have shown remarkable resolve in the face of considerable adversity. Each time, you've risen to the challenge, and I have no doubt that you will do the same now. We will get through this together. Ontarians remain committed, as we always have, by taking a cautious and gradual approach guided by the evidence. Today, we want to provide some of the data that we are using to help inform the cautious approach that will guide us over the weeks ahead. Before I hand things over to Dr. Moore, I want to respond to some extremely concerning reports that some doctors are spreading misinformation about vaccines. At a time when it's never been more important for Ontarians to have confidence in the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, this is unacceptable. I will be sending a letter to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, urging them to do everything that is possible to put an end to this behavior. They should consider all options in doing so, including reviewing the licenses of physicians found to be spreading misinformation. This behavior takes away from the unceasing efforts of the vast majority of physicians who are working to protect us all. I want all Ontarians to know that our vaccines are safe and effective. They're the best protection you have against COVID and Omicron. Please, please get vaccinated as soon as you're able. Thank you very much, and I will now turn things over to Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Minister Elliott, and good morning, everyone. Bonne journée à tous. As the Minister just indicated, the sacrifices Ontarians have been making are having an impact. I'm starting to have more hope and cautious optimism. For the first time in several weeks, the number of hospitalizations and cases in the intensive care unit is increasing at a slower pace. The severity of Omicron, coupled with the protection offered by vaccines, has meant that the length of stay for hospitalizations is now 5 days compared to 9 days for the Delta variant. We are also now starting to see our PCR test positivity stabilize between 20 and 25%. When considered alongside other data we track, such as capacity and length of stay in hospitals and ICU, this is an encouraging sign that we may be reaching the peak of Omicron transmission in Ontario in the coming weeks. While this gives me more hope, we must remain cautious and humble in the face of this aggressive virus. And the most important thing we can all do, as the Minister has said, is get vaccinated. Prevention is the key. With additional public health measures currently in place, our public health and healthcare partners have taken advantage of this time to get even more shots into arms. In just over 2 weeks, thank you to all of our vaccinators, over 150,000 Ontarians have received a first dose, and 1 million doses have been administered in total. More than 725,000 people have gotten their booster dose, and Ontario is leading the country in third doses administered. 5.7 million Ontarians have stepped up, come forward, and received their third doses. 77% of our over 70s are now protected better with their third doses. So thank you to all those that have come forward, and thank all the vaccinators across Ontario. Vaccines remain the best tool to protect ourselves against severe outcomes of COVID-19, including hospitalization and admission to intensive care. Currently, 50% of the individuals in the intensive care units across Ontario are unvaccinated, and yet the unvaccinated only make up 10% of our population. This alone demonstrates the positive protection that vaccination can provide against these severe outcomes. And the benefits of vaccination against severe outcomes have been shown across all age groups. That is why I continue to strongly encourage the parents of our youngest eligible Ontarians, those 5 to 11 years of age, to come forward and get their children vaccinated. Currently, and thankfully, 50.4% of children have received their first dose. But we want to see that number continue to climb and for parents to continue booking and coming for their second doses. The pediatric Pfizer vaccine for children is safe, it's effective, and it provides strong protection against COVID-19 and its variants. Boosters are incredibly important, and as a reminder, it's very important for those who are older in our community, who have any underlying medical disease, for our healthcare workers and pregnant individuals and those that are immunocompromised. It cannot be emphasized enough just how critical vaccination is to reducing our personal...
Right now you're hearing from, that is Dr. Kieran Moore, but earlier on we heard from Christine Elliott, who says that, just to recap, Christine Elliott says there are signs that Omicron will peak in Ontario later this month, also saying that February will continue to pose challenges, but the goal is to ensure capacity for care. Almost quite passionately spoke about some doctors that are spreading misinformation. Christine Elliott calling it unacceptable. And that's in response to a lengthy global news investigation published yesterday that found a coordinated web of a small but vocal minority of doctors are coordinating to push vaccine misinformation on patients and even selling COVID-19 vaccine exemption letters for free. It's a very interesting investigation by Global News. I read through it, and so did David as well. It's quite an eye-opener. So again, you're seeing things like that spread quite a bit, this kind of misinformation. Make sure you check and see what the source is, and is it a reliable source? That does it for the Talkback Hour. Sorry we couldn't take any more of your calls, but we wanted to jump in and get that update from Health Minister Christine Elliott and Dr. Kieran Moore. Coming up after the break, it's the Ottawa Valley News. That's right, Bruce McIntyre from the Eganville Leader coming up after this. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 15 degrees with some freezing rain. It's minus 12 in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The provincial health minister feels the Omicron variant will peak at some point this month. Christine Elliott making that announcement this morning, a media briefing going on right now, as the province reports a slight decrease today in the number of people in hospital with COVID, down by 51 from yesterday's total. But in the ICU, the figure is up to 589 people. That is 9 more than yesterday. The province has also reported 60 more deaths in Ontario, blamed on the virus. City News time 11:03, and a traffic note this hour. Switch over to freezing rain sticking to the windshield so strong in some cases you have to stop your car to clear the ice. The windshield fluid just won't do it at this point. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Snow will taper to flurries late morning, some more flurries for the afternoon, and a risk of some freezing rain or drizzle as well. A shifting wind from the east-northeast to the southwest and will rise to -1 this evening, but then drop off sharply overnight. Will drop to -20 for the low. For today, the high this evening, -1.
And right now, with some freezing rain, -15 in Ottawa, -14 in Smiths Falls. The OPP says a 49-year-old woman, a passenger in a car that collided with a transport truck, was the person who died at the scene of that collision Monday morning. It was just after 5 o'clock. OPP called to that collision on the 417 eastbound near County Road 23. An eastbound truck collided with the car. Marie Carmel Desum was pronounced dead at the scene. The driver and another passenger in that car also taken to hospital. The truck driver was uninjured. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry OPP detachment. It's being called a significant update in the murder of Greg Slewage. The OPP providing that update this hour. Detective Inspector Chris Landry will provide the update. The 39-year-old from Carleton Place was found dead in a building on Scotch Corners Road back in September of 2020. The building had been converted to a legal marijuana grow-up. Police have said Slewage died from blunt force trauma. There was also previously, the police said, a dark-colored sedan was seen leaving that property after his death. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says it will take a province-wide collaboration to tackle the housing crisis and boost the housing supply. Ford spoke this morning at the start of a virtual housing summit with Ontario municipalities, saying he hopes this event is going to be productive.
As is often the case, while the solutions may seem obvious, implementing them takes a lot of hard work and determination.
Ford says his government will provide more than $45 million in funding to help Ontario's largest municipalities cut the red tape and streamline development approvals. One city councillor wants to see the end of transport trucks driving through the downtown core. Matthew Fleury of Rideau Vanier Ward writes in an open letter to the NCC they should be more creative in their planning options to improve interprovincial crossing. He explains connections between highways need to be improved so that it takes environmental concerns into account, but also our work-from-home shift and up-to-date travel data. City News time 11:06. 8 more communities in the area now included in Rogers' 5G network. That includes Carleton Place and Perth among the centres that are now covered as part of a $300 million agreement between Rogers, the federal and provincial governments, and the Eastern Ontario Regional Network. Rogers is the parent company of this radio station. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show here on City News and Rogers TV. Rob is off today. Derek Fage filling in. It's 11 o'clock, so you're probably thinking to yourself, just after 11, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Bruce McIntyre from the Eganville Leader. He usually joins Rob. We get our Ottawa Valley report. Unfortunately, Bruce is actually on the road. It is having very difficult time with his cell coverage because freezing rain is causing havoc in Ottawa and the Valley. But Our very own City News Ottawa host and afternoon anchor Mark Day just drove in, so we wanted to get an idea from you, Mark, because when you drove in, I mean, your first reaction was kind of like, "Oh my God, what did I just go through? What's it like out there?"
It started off great.
Okay,
when I left the house,
that's good.
It was fine. I heated the car up. The windshield was nice and cleared off and ready to go. And about 2 minutes into it, just ice on my windshield. I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure I have the heater on, and I checked, my feet were freezing because the heat was just on the windshield the whole time. And I drove a little further. I didn't see any rain. It was just automatic. It was the windshield was freezing up. I was like, it's freezing rain here. And as I was driving, it was getting worse and worse. And I mean, it took me usually I can get to work 45 minutes.
45, okay. Whereabouts?
Over an hour, just across the bridge.
Okay.
Just not far from, on the Champlain, just in that area there. So, but it took me over an hour to get here. And that was just because the cars in front of me were pulling over to clear their windshields. But yeah, it was just freezing on impact.
Yeah,
from the sky.
And I mean, we should encourage people too, Mark. And I talked about it first thing this morning, even when the conditions weren't as bad as now. But, honestly, just slowing down a little bit makes a huge difference. I mean, most of the people driving along the Queensway were probably going about 75 kilometers an hour. I imagine your commute was much slower as well, right?
Yeah, I take the back roads on purpose, and I've been doing that for many years. I don't really have to deal with a lot of traffic. And luckily for me, I mean, the times I work in the day, I don't leave the house usually till after 9:30, and then I'm driving home after 6 o'clock at night. So, I mean, those are the benefits of working an afternoon shift on radio, right? So I get to avoid all the traffic, but a very difficult drive in. And I mean, I'd almost sooner drive in what I was driving in on Monday in the snow than what I had to deal with today, just because you just can't see. There's no visibility. And I know that MLC de Colleen as well put out a notice on Twitter saying the same thing, that freezing rain in the Outaouais right now, and they're dealing with windshields that are freezing up pretty quickly. So I know everyone listening who's driving around are dealing with the same thing. The wipers are going full blast, and
nothing's happening.
No, and I drank 2 gallons of windshield antifreeze on the way over here too. So that I just put in the other day.
Well, and I guess your recommendation too. You saw some people pulling off to the side of the road, and if your visibility is poor, I mean, don't continue along. I know people are trying to get places. People are late for work. You'd be amazed at how understanding your boss and management can be. Just take your time, pull over on the side of the road. Scrape your car as best you can, but wait until it's safe to get out there.
Wait until it's safe. Don't use that little crack that you have in your windshield to see through the ice. It's no, but I mean, we've been putting up some crazy weather the last few days, and just getting around. I mean, even some side streets, people are still getting stuck trying to pull off on side streets in certain areas, depending on when the plows come through, and with another dusting of snow last night. So, yeah, take your time. I mean, I don't have to remind people to take their time out there. They're dealing with the elements if they're out and about. But yeah, that was just, and I've been driving in freezing rain and snow. I'm from Cape Breton. We get our winter weather on the coast, and get the spray from the waves on the Strait of Canso. So I'm used to dealing with it, but that was something else on the way in. I mean, I couldn't keep my windshield clear. So
and patience in these kind of situations are incredibly important too, because I know we get frustrated, and the person in front of you is going 40 kilometers an hour, and it's maybe an 80 zone, and you're frustrated. But just understand, they're not comfortable. Right? In the position that they're in. They're probably white-knuckling it.
True.
So,
stressful.
Just relax. Take it easy. You're going to get to work eventually.
We'll all get there.
Exactly.
That's the main thing.
Mark, a real pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Anytime.
Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
That's City News Ottawa host and afternoon anchor Mark Day. By the way, we just had a caller calling in. Bronson westbound Queensway in that area stopped dead. Listeners should avoid the highway in this hour for sure. It's sort of stop and go in many areas. What does the freezing rain mean for Ottawa's newly reopened sledding hills? Because we just got that right. Thanks to a fresh, thick snow cover, the City of Ottawa has lifted its no sled advice on approved sled slopes. But what does that mean now that we're seeing this inclement weather, this freezing rain? We'll find out next, because River Ward City Councillor Riley Brockington joining us right after the break. This is Derek Fage filling in for Rob Snow right here on Rogers TV and City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge to say, hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, Record Center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad saying, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats every day. Jesus, Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I'm going, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store's about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. You'll come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make a gazillion dollars. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
No Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Welcome back to the Rob Snow Show here on Rogers TV and City News. Mentioned just before the break, some fresh, thick, beautiful snow cover. The city of Ottawa lifting their no sled advice on approved sled slopes. However, the question is, do we need a better system to warn residents when it's safe to sled? We see that on the canal, right? You have those flags that go up and they tell you whether it's safe or not. We see it at beaches in the summertime, whether it's safe to go in the water or not. Because the city can issue a no sledding advisory. People can go sledding on their own regardless of this advisory, right? It's simply an advisory. Here to tell us more about it, because the sledding safety tips that we're going to share, as well as, of course, in the wake of the death of 11-year-old José Abi Essal at Mooney's Bay, and Riley Brockington is the city councillor for River Ward, and I know that you spoke about doing an assessment, Riley, and called for a thorough safety review. You've had meetings with Parks and Recreation Department. Let's talk about this issue of, do we need a better system to warn residents? Because Riley, first of all, welcome to the show. And Riley, look at what we have. We've lifted that, but now we have a situation where the weather has changed quite dramatically, and all of a sudden we have freezing rain conditions.
That's correct. Good morning, Derek. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, the tragic death last month, I think, has forced the city to look at tobogganing hills more seriously going forward. There are 55 sanctioned or promoted hills in the city that the city cares for. And it has, like I said, forced the city to look at going forward if there are weather conditions that contribute to sort of unsafe conditions, such as what we had at the end of December, where there was such little snowpack. It had gone through freeze-thaw cycles. It was basically sheer ice. That, to me, is an indication that the PSA should be released and people should be dissuaded from using the hills until we get more snow like we did this week.
Riley, outside of those slick conditions at Mooney's Bay, what were some of the other safety issues there?
Well, the hill is quite tall, comparatively speaking, to other hills in the city. The north side that faces the Terry Fox Athletic Center ends or doesn't have as long of a slope as perhaps the side that faces the river.
Okay.
And so historically, people were hitting the fence that separates the center from the hill itself. And if you were going at a fairly fast rate, some people were being injured. So a berm was built between the fence and basically the hill itself, and you have to go uphill before you go down to the fence, and that helped in some regards.
Okay.
The west side of Mooney's Bay Hill that faces the river has probably the more steep decline or slope, which contributes to fast toboggan speeds, and that has to be looked at as well. So this is, I guess, the first time I'm making this known, but the city has agreed to hire a professional sort of risk assessment specialist or consultant who will be specifically looking at Mooney's Bay Hill.
Okay.
I think there are some other hills the city wants them to look at as well, but specifically the city has agreed to assess the hill. They agree that despite the hill being unsanctioned, people have been tobogganing here for years and will continue to toboggan. It's not realistic that the city's going to put a giant fence up or block people from accessing the hill. So the question really is, what are the risks that exist now, and how can the city mitigate those risks to improve overall safety? That's really where I've been pushing the city.
So if we were to put in a system to warn residents when it's unsafe, we do that on the canal. Now, perhaps it's easier because, you can really, go up and down the length of that fairly quickly. What would these safety measures look like? What would this sort of system to warn residents when it's safe or unsafe to sled, what would that take, Riley, do you think?
Well, citywide, I think the city will continue to use those PSAs, public service announcements, to have a general statement about the condition of the hills. The ice conditions were not unique to Mooney's Bay Hill. That was basically the case all over the city. I think Mooney's Bay, and I don't know all the toboggan hills in the city, but I do think the size of Mooney's Bay is probably going to give you in the top 5 toboggan hills in the city. And what I've suggested to the city is that they consider some sort of universally recognized flag system or other symbols that are used, such as the canal or the river in the summer when the lifeguards want to communicate water quality or even weather. That people know that the condition of the hill is, you can use a green, yellow, red flag, very similar to the canal. That is, you don't have to worry about whether people speak English or French. We do get a lot of new Canadians who come to the hill who live in the immediate area. And if that is used and can be used at multiple hills, it will become a universally recognized and known symbol system, and that can help. Doesn't mean people will respect it. People still go on the canal when the red flags are out. But I do think that's an additional way to communicate to people who come and say, all right, conditions aren't great. We maybe should not go tobogganing today.
Right. I know that. So, by the way, for everybody at home, there is a list of Ottawa's approved toboggan runs, which can be found at ottawa.ca. And I know, this is obviously put forward the idea of giving out more safety tips. I don't know if you have them accessible to you there, Riley, at the moment. But, what are some of those additional safety tips that the city is sharing at the moment?
Well, in addition to the accident that happened at the end of December, there were other, I think the Ottawa Paramedic Service reported that they had attended to about half a dozen fairly serious injuries on hills across the city. They certainly believe, and the city does, that wearing a helmet, especially for younger children, is advised. You should only sled during the daytime. Don't go at night when you can't see what's in front of you. Always sit or kneel and face forward. Sometimes people like to go backward, or I see kids going like face first where they lie down, and I shudder at that because the first thing to hit anything is their face. So sit uptight. So just, basic things about keeping safe, keeping your hands and arms as best you can. But look, I love to toboggan myself. I've got kids, and I see all types of behaviors, but it really is common sense. You're going down a hill, potentially with ice, at fast speeds, so make sure you're on the right toboggan. And as a parent, if the conditions don't look right, don't go tobogganing. Come back the next weekend, or come back after the next snowfall. This snow that we've received will allow people, it will be slower, and it will allow you to steer better, so you'll be in better control of your toboggan.
Yeah, and that's true now. Let's see how this freezing rain situation goes. So, as you said, just be on the lookout, see what kind of conditions, make sure you understand your surroundings, make sure you understand the conditions. Riley, before I let you go, I'd like you to go over again, just for people and perhaps some people just joining us now, the safety consultants for Mooney's Bay. Just walk us through what's happening again.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure of the scope. I wasn't involved with that, but Parks and Recreation, from what I understand, has hired a risk assessment or a risk consultant who will specifically look at Mooney's Bay Hill and Park. There may be other hills that Parks and Rec want assessed as well. I know I have other colleagues who, after the accident, brought matters to the city's attention in their local communities. But given that Mooney's Bay Hill is a toboggan destination, it's a four-season park, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing in the winter as well. I've stated quite clearly it's not realistic to expect the public to stop tobogganing at this hill. It's quite the opposite.
I agree.
Even the day after the accident, Ottawa bylaw turned away 70 families from the hill. They still come. And so I think the responsible thing to do is assess the hill for safety issues, address those issues, and reopen this hill as a sanctioned tobogganing location in Ottawa, because that's what it's been used for.
Yeah.
And if there are safety issues, they must be addressed.
Couldn't agree more. Riley, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. That's Riley Brockington, City Councillor for River Ward. And before we go to break, I'm just going to share again. So if you're looking for a list of Ottawa's approved toboggan runs, you can find that at ottawa.ca. And some of those additional safety tips that Riley shared with you, I'm just going to go over them again. So children should be accompanied by a parent or guardian. Sled only in daylight. If you're out at night, don't sled unless, the trail is well lit. Really important. And even at that point, they're really suggesting don't go sledding after dark. Always sit or kneel facing forward on the sled. Go up the side of the hill, not the middle. And I know kids are excited. They want to, get up there as soon as possible. But, just having them run off to the side and going up the side of the hill can certainly prevent injuries. Keep your hands, arms, legs inside the sled and shout out. So sometimes you'll have kids that are at the bottom of the hill and they've just, finished their fun sledding experience. Perhaps, they just shared a sled and they're talking to each other and how much fun they had, and they don't realize that someone's coming behind them. And if you take out someone's legs and they hit their head, it can be incredibly dangerous. So again, if you're a sledder, and maybe this is something you talk to your kids about, make sure you shout and warn people if they are in front of you as you're coming down. Don't leave, sleds or any other obstacles at the bottom or anywhere, along the hill. And snowfalls, things like that. Keep in mind you don't know necessarily what's under that. If it's a really small sort of blanket of snow after some really icy conditions, it can actually make those icy conditions much, much slicker. So just some things to keep in mind. We know that you want to get out there and enjoy. It's like a winter wonderland out there. All right, don't go anywhere. Lots more coming up here on the Rob Snow Show. Pat Guccione, managing editor of your Community Voice newspapers, coming up after the break. I'm Derek Fage from Rogers TV, filling in for Rob on the Rob Snow Show here on Rogers TV and City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, January 19th. Good morning, I'm Danielle Bain. Right now in Ottawa, it's minus 14 with some ice pellets coming down, and in Smiths Falls, it's minus 11. Here's what's making news this hour. Ontario's hospital numbers are in with a slight decrease. The number of people in hospital is down by 51 to 4,132, but the number of patients in the ICU is up by 9 to 589. There have also been 60 more deaths in Ontario due to the virus, the highest number of COVID-19 deaths in nearly a year. There are just over 5,700 new cases of the virus, with 244 in Ottawa, 51 in Eastern Ontario, 31 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 19 more cases in Renfrew. The OPP have charged 2 individuals in relation to the murder of Greg Sluage. Back in September of 2020, the 39-year-old was found dead at his home on Scotch Corners Road after sustaining multiple blunt force injuries. After a 16-month investigation, both 47-year-old Michael Claireau of Nepean and 38-year-old Lee Marazzo of Luskville, Quebec, have been charged with first-degree murder and will appear in court today in Perth. The city will be getting an added revenue stream from the province. Almost $38.5 million will be sent to Ottawa to support transit. That cash is above the gas tax revenue of 2 cents a litre, which was severely reduced due to the COVID pandemic and restrictions. City News Time, 11:31. I'm Danielle Bain, and for news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, normally you would keep up with Rob, but today you are keeping up with Derek because Rob is off today. This is Derek Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV, filling in for Rob. Thank you so much for joining us on 1310 and, of course, 101.1 FM and Rogers TV. Well, it's 11:30. It's a Wednesday, so you know what that means. Pat Aguccione, managing editor of Your Community Voice newspapers, joining us to talk about everything local when it comes to the city and city council. Welcome to the show, Pat. Great to hear from you.
Good morning, Derek.
I'm not sure if you just heard our last interview with Riley Brockington. The idea, coming up with this idea of perhaps a flag system, due to this tragic accident, the tragic death of this young 11-year-old girl at Mooney's Bay, and the safety issue is a big one there because it's not a sanctioned tobogganing hill. And they're throwing around the idea of maybe a flag system, sort of like we do on the canal. Any thoughts on that, Pat? I think it'd be a great idea. It's obviously, it takes resources to do, but it might be an excellent idea.
Yeah, I mean, anything you can do to improve the safety of these hills. But I think that the one important thing you said there, this is a non-sanctioned hill. So yeah. I think, some people that are bound and determined to take a trip down that hill are going to do it anyways. But yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any kind of flag system that is going to make it safe, safe for those people that are follow the rules. But there'll always be some that don't. And in no way, shape, or form do I mean this tragic accident that that people will break the rules. But I've lived in the city my entire life. Mooney's Bay has always been the go-to hill for if you want that great toboggan experience.
For sure, yeah, I've gone myself.
I'm not sure how you would ever stop it from happening. Short of having somebody sort of patrolling at full time, but and flag system sounds good. For parents to make that decision whether it's safe or not. But there'll always be someone that will ignore it anyways, but just like they do in the canal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, Riley even mentioned the day after that tragic death, bylaw turned away 70 families. So you can see how incredibly popular it is. Well, let's turn our attention to City Council and this term of City Council. What's left for City Council in this term, do you think, Pat?
Well, there's a few things, and I think in the first quarter they're supposed to make some decisions around how they proceed with Lansdowne Park, about the north side stands and the old Civic Center and air rights to make the financial partnership work for both sides. So I think that's an important thing. I don't think any long-term decisions will be made because I do believe it's been delegated to staff to work with the partners with Lansdowne. So there's Lansdowne. To a degree, there's the waste management plan that goes out several years, but there's some decisions to be made this year around what they can do around diversion. So I don't think you want to get into any more sort of long-term decisions about what should happen and tying a future council. I mean, I think as of May, when people start registering to run for council, is a bit of a sort of the start of the blackout period. I mean, that doesn't really come into effect until after Labor Day, but I don't think anybody would want to tie the future council's hands. I think the big thing this year is the public inquiry and what direction that goes in, and whether that's held in Ottawa or Toronto or what, and sort of what what comes of that. So I'm sure there'll be some covering any trial or inquiry like that. There'll always be sort of bombshell testimonies and whatnot. So I think that'll certainly take up a lot of people's time, and there's a lot of staff time taken up in getting information to the commissioner. So I think those are three of the big issues, but it's really trying to figure out the way to the other side of this pandemic financially for the city. I think your news report just said that the province gave the city another $35 million or so, which is go some way towards the deficit at OC Transpo with the ridership being so low. So I think those are some of the issues. I don't think there's going to be many long-term decisions made over the next few months.
We know who's stepping away. We know who's, of course, running, who's thrown their hat in to run for mayor. Besides those people, who do you think is perhaps most at risk of losing their seat on council?
Yeah, that's always that's a difficult thing. I mean, you know, outside of some of the animosities, the obvious animosities on this council, and the sort of the left, right, or center divide. You can put too much into that sometimes. These councillors, for the most part, are very, very good constituent councillors, and that's always how you get yourself reelected. You take care of your backyard. That's always the advice sort of any mentor or long-term politician would give anybody, starting out in sort of the political realm. Take care of your constituents, and they'll take care of you. So some of these bigger issues around LRT and that, I'm not sure how much effect they have at the ward level, other than, a point in time comes where the public at large will just say, let's get rid of a whole bunch of them. And then you sort of, that momentum is difficult to step aside from. So, but I I know most of them, and then I work with.
Yeah, for sure. It's a difficult question to answer, right? Especially in your
difficult question to answer, but they all, for the most part, I wouldn't say any of them don't work really, really hard on behalf of their constituents, but sometimes change is something that you can't campaign against, you can't message, it just happens.
Right.
For whatever reason, the public decides your time is over. I think you saw that in some of the wards, like last time in Stittsville, a very popular councillor, Shad Kadre. For whatever reason, his constituents said 3 terms or 4 terms was enough, and they brought in Glenn Gower, who is, works very, very hard on behalf of his constituents. So it's hard to understand sometimes why the public makes the decisions they do. And it's not about voter turnout, because it's always pretty consistent. So.
Yeah, consistently poor, unfortunately.
In the 30-40%.
Yeah.
It's always better when you have a good race for mayor, and I think this time there'll be a lot more interest in the mayor's race, which always helps at the ward level.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a great point. Any rumors on that? We know who's throwing their hat in the ring. I think Matthew Fleury had sort of hinted that he was thinking about it. As far as he's concerned or anyone else is concerned, do you see anybody else throwing their hat in?
I think, like any other journalist in town, they've been sort of beating the bush trying to figure out who the dark horse may be, or who the white knight may be. I haven't heard of any. And some of the usual names, I think, have said that they're definitely not running. Like a Vern White has told people he's not interested in running. So I think the closer we get to May, the possibility of some star candidate, so to speak, coming out is going by the wayside. I haven't heard of any, to be honest with you, really none. And, some people hope, something like a repeat of a Larry O'Brien, like some experienced business person comes into the race. I'm not sure if that'll happen. There was some excitement when this Brian Brulotte got in, a very successful business person, and a week later we heard that he's not in. So
right,
for whatever reason. So the closer we get to May, I think the possibility of a high profile person getting in it's less likely.
Well, and Pat, we're going to have one more counselor after the next election, right? Because we've got the new ward that they're creating. Remind us of what that situation is with the new ward.
Yeah. So Barrhaven, if not the fastest growing, or part of the municipality, is pretty close to the top. They've split part of Barrhaven in half, and they're creating a new ward there. So you'll have Riverside South, and then you'll have 2 councillors from, say, Barrhaven proper, and some people call one half the other side of Woodruff is Longfield. So sort of a Longfield, Old Barrhaven type split ward now. There's some talk out there that a very popular former councillor, Steve DeRoche, might be interested in throwing his hat back in to that new Barrhaven seat, or running in Riverside South, and maybe a Carol Ann Meehan moving over to the Barrhaven part. But that's what I've been hearing.
What about Canada North? Are we going to see Kathy Curry run, do you think?
Yeah, I think when she did her interviews, she on purpose said that she couldn't answer the question whether she would run or not, in case she was very honest, in case she had to lie.
Yeah, for sure. So and I agreed with her answer. I think that was the right answer.
Yeah, and I think she's really growing into the job. she's done what she needed to do, reach out to all those community associations that had actually put their support behind Marianne Wilkinson, the former mayor, who looked like she was, the easy choice. But like I said about, when councillors sort of take care of their own backyard, she's doing a very, very good job at coming up to speed very quickly with the issues in Canada North. She comes with a lot of experience as a former trustee and school board chair, so that's not surprising. So, yeah, and there's one other probably definite candidate is a Matt Muirhead who's run 2 or 3 times in the past. He ran twice against Marianne Wilkinson and ran against Janice Suds last time, and then his second. So, and each time he manages to get about 30% of the vote. So he certainly speaks to a certain part of the population out there. So I think you'll probably see him run again. I don't see and there was a couple of other really good candidates that went through that interview process that I think some people would like to see run.
Absolutely. Pat, when it comes to mayor, do you think anyone that's made it known that they're running for mayor, does anyone have an advantage out of that group?
I don't think anyone has an advantage right now, really, to be honest with you. Each has, brings to the table certain pluses and minuses, but no, I don't think anybody has any kind of advantage because really there's no platform to judge them on. You can only judge them on their record, their experience.
I guess Bob Chiarelli probably, can. He has name recognition, but I think he's probably the least likely. That's just my opinion. I don't know how you feel about it, Pat.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree with that. I think if someone's looking for, maybe a steady hand to take over this council, and maybe that's what council needs now. Somebody who's been a cabinet minister and a mayor and a regional chair. So I some people might agree with me that that's what this city needs right now to sort of bring the different the polar factions together. But I wouldn't dismiss him, and I think the fact that he's lost and come back a couple of times shows you can come off the mat. I've used that analogy a few times. So I wouldn't dismiss him at all.
Yeah, no, you make excellent points, Pat. You might even change my mind there. Pat, a real pleasure talking to you. Always appreciate you calling in and spending time with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek.
All right, take care. That's Pat Aguccioni, managing editor for your Community Voice newspapers. Coming up after the break, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is holding an update on the national COVID-19 situation. We're going to bring you that live. You're listening to The Rob Snow Show. This is Derek Fage filling in right here on Rogers TV and City News.
I'm blessed to be married to someone who is a scientist and spent a lot of time following what was happening over in China ahead of time. So he did give us the heads up that this was coming. Not that we believed him right off the bat, but when it did happen very, very quickly, we were prepared. We had hand sanitizer and we were set up to not close our doors. So we locked the kitchen down at Wellington Street, but we left this kitchen open. We put in protocols immediately. We only allowed our very small crew of 4 or 5 people in at the time. No deliveries were allowed to come in or out of the building without, they just weren't allowed in and out of the building. So we met them at the loading dock and had very strict protocols in place right away. We had masks and hand sanitizer and the whole thing. So we're very lucky from that perspective, and we're able to, learn as we went as far as doing small, individually packed caterings, the frozen soup program, food for the Ottawa mission. So we didn't have to close the kitchen and then learn how to reopen it. We just were able to modify and shift as we needed to. Because of our partnership with the Ottawa Mission, we were able to very quickly help support them. They were able to send us some product and some supplies, so it wasn't a burden on our business, and we were able to supply the staffing and the packaging to help produce that when they needed it the most. And we produced about 1,400 meals a week to complement their meals, and we started our soup program right away. We realized very quickly that there was a need in the community to get together and all work together, not only to support local, but also just to support all the people that were suddenly in a position of, being locked down and not being able to get out. So by starting that soup program, our community, our clients got online and started making donations for the soups, and we were able to produce the soups and get them back out to people that needed it. We're right now currently making 150 liters of soup per week, but we've made, I would say, 5,000 or 6,000, easily since the pandemic. Probably more. I'd have to do the math, but lots. I think everybody in the city has to be very aware of how blessed we were to have great weather this summer and people were able to get out and about, and that's going to shift. So we do have to be much more aware of who our most vulnerable is, and I really think we have to work together as groups. There are so many organizations in the city that are doing something and contributing and working together, and I think it doesn't matter who, but see what you can do to just step up and help them, whatever it is, whether it's driving or delivering food, or someone has extra zucchini in their garden, or if they can afford to donate some money to any of these organizations. I just think we all have to work together. We're smarter and wiser than we were the first time.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Derek Fage here, filling in for Rob Snow. As promised, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is holding an update on the national COVID-19 situation. Of course, not just himself there, but other ministers. And we're going to join Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos for an update on the national COVID-19 picture.
And if eligible, get boosted as well. Merci. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Just a reminder for the journalists who joined us in the room, we will have 12 minutes for questions in the room and then go to the phone line. Please remember that if you ask for French and English translation, you will lose time to ask questions. And if we could keep the answers brief, then we can get to as many questions as possible. The first question will go to Kevin Gallagher, and then it will be Laurence Martin. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Inflation's really at all-time highs, highest since 1991 for an annual rate. This is putting pressure on prices for food, gasoline, bottom line for businesses, and government spending. And increased government spending during the pandemic certainly has helped fuel these high inflation rates. So what is the government's plan to try and combat it this year?
First of all, through this pandemic, we've had Canadians' backs. We've been there to support them with wage supports for people who lost their jobs, with supports for small businesses, for workers, for families, for seniors. And that's part of why we've been able to make it through this pandemic as well as we have, despite all the tragedy and loss. We will continue to be there because we came into this pandemic one of the best fiscal positions of anyone in the G7, and we continue to have an extremely strong fiscal position. The inflation challenge that the world is facing right now is a global challenge linked to, obviously, this pandemic and the path out of it, but also linked to significant disruptions in supply chains around the world. That's why we're continuing to work to be there to support Canadians. Just last week, I announced that families in Nova Scotia are going to save hundreds of dollars a month as we've reduced childcare fees because of investments we made across the country, and other places like Alberta and Yukon are also seeing significant reductions in those prices for families. We'll continue to move forward on supports in terms of housing, in terms of supports for workers, supports for families, because we recognize that rising cost of living and the prices of groceries and gas is a real pressure and stressor for many, many families.
So what should we take from that? Is this something that we will anticipate? It sounds like that's more government spending, that's more stimulus, that's more aid for people. But in the 2021 economic and fiscal update, the government seemed to step away from any references to fiscal guardrails or winding down the stimulus spending that came from this pandemic. So what should we make of that? Is this the foreseeable future where inflation rises, but where is the check and balance in terms of the fiscal guardrails and reining in the stimulus spending that was necessary during the pandemic, but is now exacerbating the inflationary situation Canadians find themselves in.
Actually, Kevin, what you'll find when you look at our fiscal projections is an indication that the debt to GDP ratio needs to continue to decrease in this country. And that's something that we've always put forward as a sense of fiscal responsibility, that the size of our debt in relation to the size of our economy needs to continue to decline, and it is doing exactly that. But at the same time, yes, as you point out, we are making the choice to be there to support Canadians, to have their backs, to support seniors, to support families, to support small businesses, to support workers. We're going to continue to be there to support Canadians because we know that helping each other out is not just the best way to get through this medical challenge, this pandemic crisis. It's also the best way to make sure our economy comes roaring back as strongly as possible. And that's actually something we've seen when we were quicker to recover the jobs lost during the pandemic than the United States was, for example. We've seen our economic growth numbers strong, and indeed, we're going to continue to be there to make sure we're supporting Canadians so that, yes, they can handle the challenges around the rising cost of living while at the same time get through this pandemic.
Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. Since the pandemic began, we've seen some politicians facing increasing threats. Their homes are being targeted, their families. What do you think needs to be done to combat that? And do you think that your legislation to protect healthcare workers and patients could be extended to protect decision makers, politicians?
I think nobody in the course of doing their job should be faced with threats of violence, threats to their family, and that applies for healthcare workers or for politicians or anyone else. And we recognize that mental health stresses, economic stresses, issues around extremism, and protests have created a dynamic where there are more threats to people serving the public than before, whether it's doctors or public health experts or politicians. Our responsibility as a government is to continue to make sure we're keeping all Canadians safe, and that includes people who serve at all levels. And that's why we continue to engage with public security, with police services to ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect Canadians. But we haven't, at this point, looked at similar legislation. I think the focus on health workers was one that everyone understood was necessary. I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we make sure that everyone else is safe as well.
And on Ukraine, the Ukrainian government has been asking Canada for defensive weapons. And I know that some of our allies, the UK, the US, they have provided weaponry. Others have been reluctant. They don't want to provoke Russia. And I'm wondering what's taking us so long to make a decision. Is it a case where we don't want to antagonize the Russians on this?
I think one of the things that we have seen is that Russia is looking for excuses or reasons to continue and even escalate its aggression against Ukraine. We have been there as part of Operation Unifier training and supporting Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian military. We've been there with supports in many different ways, and we will continue to be. The decisions that we take will be based on what is best for the people of Ukraine and what is best towards keeping peace globally as long as we possibly can.
Antagonize the Russians?
We're looking at many different factors when we make decisions on how to best support the people of Ukraine. The bottom line is we will be there to continue supporting the people of Ukraine through multiple levels and layers of support.
Okay, we're going to go to Global News, then Radio-Canada, then we have Canadian Press, then we have the Winnipeg Free Press, and then we have the Star, and we have 5 minutes left.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. Canadian Special Operations Forces have deployed to Ukraine to look at options for supporting the Ukrainian government.
All right, well, there you have it.
Embassy
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau answering questions from the press. We wanted to jump in there and just make sure everybody got an idea of what the Prime Minister and what the federal government are talking about at this time. This is kind of it was their update on the national COVID-19 situation, but of course, other questions to be asked. Big one being, of course, inflation, highest we've seen in many, many years, 4.8%. We mentioned that a little bit earlier on in the show. Well, that does it for me. Rob Snow will be back tomorrow. Not to worry, Rob will be back. Again, a reminder, the Talkback Hour happens each and every day from 10 to 11. Rob will have one of the issues, or some of the issues, it could be multiple ones, for you to talk to and tune into. The number here, 613-750-1310 for that Talkback Hour each and every day. I'm Derek Fage, host of Daytime Ottawa on Rogers TV. You can tune into Daytime 2, 6, and 11 p.m. each and every day. Coming up right after the news is the Sam LaPrade Show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to City News.
The Rob Snow Show. This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.